time.
Glad to be here.
Gabi, avisa aqui no chat, tá? Por favor, quando estivermos online.
Ok, tá apenas carregando, eu aviso aqui sim.
Online.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Virgilio Viana. I'm the chair of Sustainable Development Solutions Network for the Amazon. I'd like to welcome all the panelists and all the attendees of this conference. This conference is a part of an event which is usually held around the General Assembly of the United Nations in September. It usually takes place in New York, and it's usually hosted by Columbia University. This year, because of the pandemic, everything is happening online. So this is the third edition of the Amazon Day, which is part of this conference, and it usually takes half a day, 1 day, and it's an opportunity to bring Amazon issues in the global discussions around sustainable development. We're going to have a very nice and rich session. It's actually divided in two. We're going to have first a look at the SDGs, how SDGs are moving and what are the challenges for SDGs in the Amazon region. And then we're going to talk about green economy in the second half of this session. So it's my pleasure to host you all here. It's a special moment for the Amazon in many aspects. And as a brief introduction, I'd just like to say that we have two sides of this coin. On one hand, we have a very alarming situation of very rapid growth in terms of deforestation and social conflicts in the Amazon. Part of it associated with political changes that are happening in countries like Brazil and also in Bolivia and also in several of the other Amazon countries. And on the other side of the coin is that this alarming growth of deforestation, forest fires, and social conflicts has resulted in an increase of engagement of sectors that usually do not participate so actively in the debate around the Amazon. And I refer to global investors, CEOs of large banks, of large companies that all have made statements and commitments towards the Amazon, which creates an opportunity. So in a way, we live, as the Chinese say, a crisis that has threat on one hand and opportunities on the other hand. And with this very brief introduction, let me just pass it over to the next part of the program, which is going to be a video by Amazon youth leaders. And we are very concerned that the future of the Amazon depends on the vision and the commitment of the youth. So for those of us who are not so young anymore, it's good to refresh our esteem and spirit with the vision and the hopes and the aspirations of the future generations. So let me turn to the video. and always these events have a little lag. So this is part of the technology. So here it comes.
Em 2015, as lideranças mundiais criaram os 17 Objetivos para o Desenvolvimento Sustentável, os ODS, que nós podemos usar para criar um futuro sustentável até 2030. Nós temos apenas mais 10 anos para alcançá-los. 10 curtos anos para mudar completamente como vivemos, lideramos nossos países e interagimos com a natureza. A mudança pode ter vindo mais rápido do que esperávamos com a pandemia do novo coronavírus. Mas essa mesma pandemia nos escancarou quão urgentes mudanças precisam acontecer. É a juventude que irá guiar a recuperação do mundo pós-pandemia. Temos a oportunidade agora de ensinar como voltarmos a ser melhores ainda. Então a pergunta é: que mundo você quer para 2030?
Para 2030, eu quero um mundo com mais respeito, com mais livre expressão.
A Amazônia que eu quero para o futuro é uma que a educação possa atingir a todos, independente de classe socioeconômica, gênero ou idade.
Um mundo mais resiliente, menos desigual.
Onde as pessoas tenham oportunidades iguais de ter um trabalho digno.
Que respeitem mais a nossa cultura indígena e que acabe com o desmatamento, porque é o que vem mais acontecendo de uns anos para cá.
Que a igualdade de gênero seja livre de preconceitos e discriminações.
E onde o desenvolvimento econômico seja sempre pautado na sustentabilidade, com tolerância zero à grilagem e aos processos de redução, recategorização e extinção das unidades de conservação.
Um mundo onde as pessoas tenham mais consciência ambiental, tenham mais respeito com a natureza.
Sueño con una Amazonía en la que la juventud tenga una gran representatividad y una participación más activa en la sociedad, logrando así que los jóvenes sean vistos y considerados como una pieza fundamental para el progreso y desarrollo sostenible de nuestro ecosistema amazônico.
É um mundo onde a gente possa valorizar todos os conhecimentos, todos os povos.
Para 2030, eu quero um mundo onde nossas matrizes energéticas sejam majoritariamente renováveis, contribuindo assim positivamente para as mudanças climáticas e o bem-estar de todos.
É uma Amazônia toda preservada. Todos os povos indígenas possam viver do jeito que sempre viveram e tenham sua liberdade e autonomia de escolha.
Eu espero ver mais mulheres, indígenas, quilombolas e povos tradicionais na liderança das agendas locais e globais.
Uma Amazônia onde todos e todas tenhamos acesso a alimentos de qualidade e livres de agrotóxicos, que valoren a las cadenas productivas y a nuestros agricultores amazónicos.
Um mundo em que todas as pessoas tenham acesso aos serviços de saneamento básico de maneira gratuita e eficiente, em especial o acesso à água.
Que a medicina tradicional praticada na Amazônia possa ser respeitada e uma aliada da medicina convencional.
Para el 2030 quiero un planeta lleno de oportunidades laborales, sociales y respetos por los derechos de la naturaleza.
É um mundo mais empático, onde as pessoas tenham mais consciência ambiental e umas com as outras, e que a gente possa plantar um futuro possível para as futuras gerações.
Anchata munani, alin causa y canampa, llapa runa, Amazônia sacha kunawan, hichaka, mana sacha chikunayawanchu, aswanka, llapa, pachamama causa y kunawan, ayupi, ñaupakman pulinanchispa.
Eu tenho muitos sonhos para a Amazônia, mas o que eu mais cultivo hoje é que todos esses sonhos que foram falados aqui se realizem antes de 2030. Que a mudança comece agora, comece hoje e que a gente não espere pelo amanhã.
Juntos somos melhores.
Se você deseja contribuir com a nossa iniciativa jovem, tem de 18 a 30 anos, inscreva-se no nosso voluntariado, transforme seu incômodo em ação e trabalhe com os objetivos de desenvolvimento sustentável em prol da Amazônia.
Excellent. I think was a good opportunity to hear to the voices of many of the youth of the Amazon. And it's an interesting movement that's taken place. I think Greta Thunberg has inspired a lot of people across the world, including in the Amazon. Let me now turn over to Felipe. Felipe Castro is the director of the SDG Center for Latin American and Caribbean, based in Bogota. The SDG Center has just launched an index for the region, Latin America and Caribbean. So it's our pleasure to give the floor to Felipe Castro, who is going to give us a perspective not only about the whole region, but also with a zoom on the Amazon. So Felipe, the floor is yours.
There we go. Thank you very much, Virgilio, for the introduction. It's great to be here. I want to say hello also to my colleagues in the panel, especially to Emma Torres from SDSN Secretariat that has been supporting the establishment of the SDG Center here in Bogota, and also to Juan Pablo Unilla from the IDB that is also part of the members that supported the establishment of the SDG Center at Universidad de los Andes. As Virgilio introduced, I'm going to present to you in a brief presentation the main results of an exercise that we've been doing, trying to measure the progress of the SDGs across the world. This is a report that connects with the efforts at the global level that have been led by Professor Sachs and the SDSN Secretariat based in Paris, trying to set up a tool that enables us to aggregate data on country performance and measure with the same instrument, the same indicators, the progress of the different countries around the world in achieving this report. This is the first version that we have for the region. We launched it right before the pandemic hit the Latin American region. So the picture that I'm going to show you is before COVID hit our countries. So probably the next report will try to measure the impact that COVID had in achieving the SDGs. However, in this report, we also included some analysis of the COVID short-term impacts, trying to figure out which of the 17 goals were going to be more affected by the COVID pandemic. Also, a contribution of this regional report is that we have better indicators for the region. At the global level, a lot of indicators were from OECD countries. And as we know, most of the OECD countries are European, not from the region. So in this sense, we included new indicators. 24% of the indicators that we used to do this report are from the region. So this is a better measurement of how we are or we are not achieving the SDGs. The report includes two types of measurements. One is an index in which we set the goal at a 100 level. So the number that you're going to see in the results is from a scale that goes from 0 to 100. And we also included some dashboards that measure the level of progress and also the trends. These dashboards show us if our countries are on track or off track in achieving the SDGs in 2030. And fortunately, since this report was made 4 years after the SDGs were approved, we also were able to measure the progress and compare how we were in 2015 when the SDGs were approved and how we were in 2019. Before I go into showing you the detail of the reports at the regional level, I want to show you this graph because it's a good introduction of the situation that we are having right now at the Latin American and the Caribbean region. These graphs show you how the different regions across the world have been making progress in achieving the SDGs. We see, for example, the East and South Asian countries that were able to manage the COVID pandemic in a better way than the one we're doing it. And we see that they are making big progresses in achieving the SDGs. However, the Latin American region has been left behind in this process, despite that in the general ranking, we have on average scores of 70, and maybe we are better than African countries or sub-Saharan African countries. The progress that the region have been making in the last years is not at the same level of the rest of the world. We are practically not making any progress in meeting the SDGs, at least in the first years of trying to implement this agenda. The regional index is the one that I'm showing you, shows and confirms what the global report just told us. On average, the Latin American region has a score of 63 on a scale that goes from 0 to 100. This means that we are not on track on meeting the SDGs. And in general terms, the 9 Amazonian countries are also on the same average. There are not big differences between the Latin American region and the 8 Amazon countries that we included in this report. Unfortunately, the French Guiana was not able to be included in this report. This is the only country of the region that we were not able to get data and have the same measurement. So that's why that's the only country that hasn't been included in this ranking. Chile, Uruguay, and Costa Rica are the countries that are leading this ranking. On the other hand, for example, we have Haiti, Guatemala, and Guyana. There are the countries that are ranking worst. And we have a big group of countries that are around 67, 63 in this ranking. Most of the Amazonian countries are here. Ecuador is the country that performs better in this ranking that, as I mentioned before, shows the picture before the COVID pandemic hit the region. If we compare Amazon country with the rest of the Latin American countries, there are not big differences. We see, for example, only in SDG 15, life on land, there's a bit of difference in which Amazon countries perform better than the rest of the Latin American countries. And the other big difference is in SDG 16, that is related with institution, corruption, and strong institutions. In this case, the rest of the Latin American countries perform better than Amazon countries. But on average, we see that there are big differences between across the 17 SDGs. We see, for example, there are a group of 4 SDGs that are at the level of OECD countries. This means that they have a performance of 80 or better in the index. For example, SDG 1, end of poverty, SDG 11, sustainable cities, climate action, and also access to clean water are the 4 SDGs in which the region performs better. On the other hand, we have SDGs in which we are at the worst level, even from sub-Saharan countries, such as SDG 10, that measures inequalities. We know that our region is one of the most unequal regions of the world. Also SDG 16, because of all of the problems that we have with corruption, with justice, with rule of law, also with violence. And additionally, SDG 9 that has to do with industry, technology, and innovation. Those are like the 4 SDGs or the 4 goals in which the region performs the worst. Regarding the progress, this index, I think this is the most important result of all the report, because it shows that the pace in which we are moving towards achieving the SDGs is not the pace that we need if we really want to meet the goals, such as the SDSN Youth video argues, in which we really need to change things and really need to do things different if we want to meet these goals. So the index confirms that we are not doing what we need to do. The average progress of the Latin American region, it's only 0.6. This means that if we keep at this pace, we're going to take 50 years to achieve the SDGs. So this is 5 times more the time that we have in the last decade that we're going to have to really meet the SDGs. And in the case of the Amazon countries, it's worse, because it would take 80 years to meet the SDGs if we have the same progress that we've been having in the first years. It's important also to see that some of the Amazon countries are doing worse than they were in 2015. This is the case, for example, of Venezuela, that has a negative progress in meeting the SDGs, and also Brazil is struggling, and it's made almost no progress in achieving the SDGs as the measure that we have here through this index. Also, we can remember that one of the main challenges that the SDG agenda has is trying to connect the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, that aim to deliver progress on the social and economic level, with the environmental agenda. So if we separate the different goals between these three dimensions, the environmental goals that are related with biosphere conservation, the social goals that are related with society, and the economic goals that are related with economy, we see that most of the progress that I just show you is related with progress at the economic level and also at the social goals of the agenda. If we concentrate in 4 of the goals that are related with environment, that are SDG 6, 13, 14, and 15, we see that in the region, the Latin American region is making small progress, and particularly the Amazon countries are making no progress on average on achieving these SDGs. So this confirms some of the main critiques that we're having right now regarding the SDG agenda. This is a paper that was just published this year on Nature, that shows that environmental destruction is not being avoided with the Sustainable Development Goals. What they do in this paper is that they take all the SDG indicators and they analyze the correlations with socioeconomic indicators and also biodiversity indicators that are related with preventing the biodiversity collapse. And what they show is that we are having progress. There's a strong correlation with the socioeconomic level, but not with biodiversity indicators. So the SDGs are not meeting the environmental targets and are not preventing environmental destruction across the globe. Also, in terms of the impact of COVID, the things that were going better are now going to be worse, because we see that most of the impacts that our region is having regarding COVID is affecting those that are being left behind. The most vulnerable populations are the ones that are most affected. Informal labor is being affected because of social distancing. Unemployment rates across the region are rising. Poverty levels are also rising across the region. The access to health, access to education, access to food is also being strongly affected. The gender inequality is having bigger gaps between men and women. So all of the indicators in which we were performing better are now going to be hit harder by COVID, and probably the results of next year will show a reduction in most of these indicators. And finally, also to set the table for the discussion of the panel, across the different indicators that we include in this report, these 8 issues are the ones in which the region, and particularly the Amazon countries, are performing worst. Population, for example, who feels safe walking alone at night. This is a proxy that measures security, citizen security across our region, is one of the indicators in which we perform worst. Also, traffic death rates, sustainable nitrogen management index, and adolescent fertility rate are some indicators in which the level at which the Amazon countries are not necessarily on track in meeting the goals in 2030. And additionally, other indicators such as prevalence of obesity, the rest list index species survival, incidence of malaria, and all the indicators related with vaccines are also showing not only progress, but they are going backwards in having lower levels in which the direction they should have been advancing in meeting the SDGs. So this is, in short, the results that we have in the report. You can check the report in our website. Unfortunately, it's only in Spanish. We are going to update also an executive summary in English shortly. And this is some data that I think it's relevant to start the discussion on how the SDGs are not really showing progress in the different goals as they should be showing it after 5 years of being approved at the UN Assembly.
Thank you, Felipe, so much to have this overview of the whole region. Two things that strike me. One is the slow speed of progress towards meeting the SDGs. And the second is a challenge that I think is still open, which is to divide Amazon countries between Amazon regions of those countries and the remainder, because having the statistics on the average of countries does not reflect necessarily what happens in the region. Usually the Amazon is worse than the non-Amazon parts of the Amazonian countries. So I think that's a challenge that we can actually explore with the discussants later. Now let me turn over to our panel. We have a very rich panel, and the challenge is to have you be very synthetic and objective in your remarks. We have 2 rounds of 4 minutes. And I'd like to ask you first, what, in your opinions, given the backdrop information that was provided by Felipe, what are the challenges, and how has the pandemic affected the scenario? Has it made any more difficult, easier? What has been the impact of the pandemic overall towards meeting these challenges? So first of all, let me turn it to Emma Torres. Emma, the floor is yours. And please introduce yourselves as you speak, so that I don't make any mistake.
Thank you, Virgilia. It's a pleasure to be in this panel with all friends and committed to the Amazon. I'm Emma Torres. I'm a Vice President for SDSN for the Americas, and I'm very delighted to also co-chair SDSN Amazonia with Virgilio. The presentation that Felipe made is very clear that the region was already in a bad track, even before the pandemic. Globally, COVID has had tremendous impact on the overall SDGs. There is a major setback. We expect that poverty, SDG 1, will increase by 70 million by the end of the year. It's expected that 130 million more people will be under chronic hunger. And SDG 3 health has a tremendous disruption, not only because of the health services, but also supply chains. So that affected many other diseases like tuberculosis, malaria, etc. And not to mention that SDG 4, which was a major achievement of the past years, is also under major threat. 24 million young students, children, will be dropping out or not having access to education at the end of 2020. And as far as SDG 8, we all know that we are living and going to confront one of the worst recessions of the century. So what are the perspectives here in terms of globally? I mean, I think the number one, I'm supporting the Lancet Commission on COVID, which is working on 2 areas. One is health and the other is economic recovery. And, you know, the commissioners have the consensus that the number one macroeconomic policy right now is public health. We need to suppress the pandemic. this is the #1 priority across the board, whether it is globally or whether it's the Amazon. Suppress the pandemic is the #1 priority because we cannot make progress on other indicators if that is not under control, which means that we need to really strengthen public policy measures. And obviously, in parallel, the issue of the vaccines that we are hoping that will be able to scale up and manage to have a fair distribution. So what are the economic recovery plans? I would say that in general, OECD has just issued a report in which we see that actually the sectors that are being benefited are not necessarily the sectors where we would like to see on the transformation. And the only ones that have at least made a commitment to a transformation that is more sustainable is the European Union with the Green New Deal and a commitment to have carbon neutrality by 2030. And China recently made a commitment to be carbon neutral by 2060. So where is our Amazon in the middle of this? And I think it is clear that COVID-19 has had a tremendous impact, particularly in its evidence on illegal deforestation and illegal mining. It also has made evident the inequities that the region already had. As Virgilio said, the Amazon region, UNDP made a study on a few years back on the Human Development Index in the region, and it was every country, they were lower than the average of the country. So that might evident the lack of access to health sector, water, sanitation, energy, transportation, education, etc. So in addition to that, indigenous people have been severely affected. As of September 15, 239 communities have been affected. And it's estimated that 57,000 indigenous people are infected with already 1,800 deaths. So this is dramatic, and obviously the #1 priority, again, is to suppress the pandemic, particularly with the indigenous people. I try to, in that sense, make that, that we have telemedicine, medical care, protected equipment available to them, along the line some of the work that FAS is doing with other groups in the region. And I would say then on the recovery plan cannot be business as usual at all. And I think the issue is how to recover the economy in the Amazon should be based in sustainable transportation, health sector, education, broadband access, and obviously suppressing the pandemic, but also stopping deforestation. I know my minutes are up, but I just wanted to share with you some initial thoughts that had to do particularly with the reflections we're having at the Lancet Commission right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emma. And 2 points that come from your presentation. One is that the pandemic is #1 priority, and second, that recovery should not be business as usual. Let me remind all of our guests that this alarm that goes on is part of the game. So it's Deborah who is doing the control of the time. So it's my pleasure to turn it over to Beto Verissimo. Beto, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks, Virgilio, for inviting me. I'll be brief. I'm a co-founder of Amazon. It's a think and do tanks organization based in the Brazilian Amazon. I'm also co-founder of Center for Sustainable Entrepreneurship, and I'm affiliated scholar at Princeton University. So that's my current affiliations. Are you here well?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. So I'll try to be briefly. And first, as a contribution, we did analysis, I think back in 2010, using sustainable development, the Millennium Goals, and we did analysis for the Amazonia countries. And we break down those countries in the states and province scales. I mean, 54 different states and province. So that allows to separate the Amazonia part of the territory for the rest of the country. So we did an analysis in the Peruvian Amazonia, the Colombia Amazonia, and the Bolivia and Brazil. So that's the point that Virgilio made, that those Amazonia part of the countries are lagging behind. as they are the backyards of those countries. So that the social indicator was performed much lower than the rest of the country. So I think it's possible to do this, and you will break down and state and province data. I think the data, if it was data available in 2009, then the year that we did the analysis, I think that's probably still there. So in the case of Brazil, the data, we can go even below at the municipality level, and that's possible to do analysis and kind of thing. A second contributions, we did an analysis using social progress index for the Brazilian Amazon municipalities. In the case of the Brazilian Amazon municipality, with 772 municipalities. The data in Brazil allows you to break down, and we can do, and if SDG wants to do, it's possible to break down in the municipality level also. So just a question of methodology. And second, it's interesting to see any cooperation across the globe. When you look at the new tropics, and I think Africa is the same. Southeast Asia is different, but usually the tropical rainforest countries is lagging behind any measure of developing. It's very close to sub-Saharan countries. It's may tell something in common. That's any analysis that you do in terms of development, they always lagging behind in the social indicators and economic indicators. The sub-Saharan countries are not as important as a tropical country in terms of climate change, of climate on the climate debate. So it's really, it needs to go beyond sometimes what the overall description. I think, and you look ahead in the next 10 years, although this country has relative and democracy are present, although democracy in those countries can vary a lot among the Latin American and Caribbean countries. A part of Venezuela, most of the country has some another, in a way or another, a democracy that can be, it's not explained by democracy.
Beto, you're mute. For whatever reason, your microphone is off. No, just got cut off. No. Something happened. Your voice just disappeared. So Beto turned off, and maybe he's going to come back. But I think the point that Beto made is very interesting. The fact that we have a similarity between sub-Saharan Africa and tropical rainforest countries. In a way, something that also Felipe mentioned, the overall development index are very low, which is an interesting puzzle to explore in more detail. Another point that Beto made that was important is that his team has done an analysis breaking down to sub-national levels, separating Amazon regions from the rest of the Amazon countries. So that's very useful, and I think that's an opportunity right here for SDS in Amazonia and the SDG Center and to collaborate with Beto on this. Beto has not come back as I can see, so let me turn, and I'll give him the floor when he comes back if the technology allows. So let me turn it over to Carlos Lazari from OTCA, the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization. So Carlos, the floor is yours.
Obrigado, Virgílio. Eu vou falar em português, uma questão de poder ter melhor os argumentos e me sinto mais confortável falando nesta língua. Eu peço, enfim, como nós temos interpretação, por favor.
Carlos, just a minute. Let me just remind everybody that in the lower part of the screen, on the right-hand side, in the bottom, there is a button called interpretation. So there you can switch languages in case Portuguese is not a language familiar to you. So, Carlos, sorry for this interruption. Back to you.
Obrigado, Virgílio. A minha fala depois vai ser complementada pelo meu colega de organização, o professor Diego Pacheco. Eu queria fazer uma breve apresentação da organização e, em seguida, fazer um comentário sobre o comentário que você fez, Virgílio, em relação à questão dos territórios amazônicos vis-à-vis o restante dos territórios dos países, do conjunto dos territórios dos países. Eu quero dizer que a nossa organização nasce com o Tratado de Cooperação Amazônica em 78 e teve origem num conjunto de consensos entre os países celebrar esse Tratado de Cooperação. E é um documento da maior atualidade, porque já naquela época já falava, com outras palavras, em desenvolvimento sustentável, anos antes do relatório Brundtland. O documento, o tratado, teve e tem o objetivo de promover o desenvolvimento integral da região e o bem-estar das suas populações, além de reforçar naturalmente a soberania dos países sobre seus territórios amazônicos. E o principal meio no tratado, na organização, para atingir esses objetivos é a cooperação regional, cooperação sul-sul e cooperação com outros países e com outras agências multilaterais, e é aí onde eu vou encaixar o meu último comentário. A premissa básica do trabalho da OTCA, da Organização do Tratado de Cooperação Amazônica, vem da geografia, porque o bioma amazônico é uma coisa só e, portanto, coloca os países que o compartilham como condôminos, dos quais se exige um esforço permanente de coordenação interna e regional, no sentido de fortalecer as políticas públicas voltadas para seus territórios amazônicos. E, naturalmente, por ter essa premissa da geografia, essas políticas públicas devem harmonizar-se para poder respeitar essa unicidade da realidade geográfica, que é a premissa básica do nosso trabalho. E o papel da OTCA é valer-se da cooperação para sempre, com a dimensão regional acoplada às dimensões nacionais, entre outras ações, ajudar a capacitar os quadros dentro que comporão as instituições responsáveis pela formulação e execução daquelas políticas. Portanto, a OTCA trabalha com uma agenda positiva de cooperação e recebeu recentemente um apoio de 7 dos 8 países amazônicos numa recente cúpula realizada por videoconferência, em que os 7 presidentes de países amazônicos confirmaram e reafirmaram o seu compromisso com o fortalecimento da organização. Brevemente, nós temos 2 eixos estratégicos fundamentais de trabalho. O primeiro deles é o fortalecimento das economias locais, uma coisa que já foi referida aqui, e que tem, naturalmente, como objetivo, as oportunidades de trabalho e de empreendimento para as novas gerações de amazônicas, com o objetivo de fixá-las e não, de alguma forma, minorar o êxodo que é permanente em todas as partes dos territórios amazônicos. Esse objetivo, esse estratégico, ele se decompõe em 4 ou 5 temas, que são a conservação e uso sustentável dos bosques e da diversidade biológica, saneamento básico, que é um novo tema ao qual nós estamos nos dedicando em parceria com o BID, gestão de resíduos sólidos, líquidos e infraestrutura verde, fortalecimento das cadeias produtivas de valor dos produtos amazônicos, com maior inovação tecnológica, saúde e tecnologia sanitária, do qual exemplo várias ações em relação às populações indígenas e, mais recentemente, um projeto assinado com o BID para criar planos de contingência para a questão do Covid. Tem um telefone tocando. O segundo...
Não, é o sinal do tempo, Carlos.
Desculpa, já estou terminando. Então, o segundo eixo estratégico, ele fala do fortalecimento da cooperação regional através da ótica, particularmente em termos de conservação e uso sustentável da biodiversidade. E aí, nesse fortalecimento é que entra justamente a síndrome da renda média, que é uma das grandes dificuldades que a OTCA encontra, em conjunto com os seus membros, de poder manter os fluxos de financiamento não reembolsável, ou seja, de recursos não reembolsáveis, porque os nossos países são todos considerados de renda média por grande parte dos países que dão origem a esses fundos. Então, esse é um grande desafio que nós estamos enfrentando, e agora, só para terminar, nós temos uma aproximação formal com a CEPAL, que eu vejo que tem um representante aqui, o Mussi, que deve falar sobre isso, em relação a fazer um estudo sobre essa questão da desigualdade dos territórios amazônicos em relação aos demais partes dos territórios dos países amazônicos. Essa é a minha primeira aproximação. Obrigado.
Muito obrigado, Carlos. E acho que seu comentário, sua intervenção mostra aí os desafios da UTCA nesse contexto. Na sequência, eu queria passar para o Diego Pacheco. Diego, a palavra é sua.
Thank you very much, Virgilio. I want to complement the intervention of the Executive Director. I am Diego Pacheco, Technical Advisor of ACTO. Well, regarding implementation of the SDGs in the Amazon region, I consider important to highlight that, well, not all the territories have the same conditions to achieve the SDGs. There is a lot of differentiation. And, well, in some regions, it's more complex to reach the SDGs because, well, they have a greater structural problems, and this is the case of the Amazon region. And, well, also, I think that it is very difficult to be successful on all the SDGs simultaneously. The achievement of 17 objectives, 169 targets, well, at the same time presents really a great challenge for the countries, for the Amazon countries. And in the current situation, there is a high risk for this to happen, or it's unlikely to happen, the achievement at the same time of the objectives. Also, in this context, I want to ratify the importance of the means of implementation, financing, access to technology, capacity building, provided by international cooperation is very key for achieving the SDGs. However, at the international level, the focus is more on accountability rather than on support and on facilitation. And in this context, well, the regional cooperation can play an important role, at least in the context of South-South cooperation for capacity building. So the question is then, what can we do for moving forward in the context of the COVID-19? And also I agree that we have to make efforts to undertake a qualitative leap in the way we do things to get closer to our vision of a sustainable Amazon. And in this context, well, I think that there are three issues to discuss. The first one is, well, we have to start prioritizing SDGs and their goals, seeking synergies, interconnections in their implementation, and also taking into account the added value of the regional cooperation to help improving national performances. Clearly, well, we will have to make priorities to enhance and qualify also the regional cooperation for the achievement of the SDGs. The Executive Director has already highlighted some of the key issues to be focused on the future for the Amazon region. Second, well, I think there is important to strengthen the good practices that exist in our region, in our countries, establishing mechanisms that allow exchanging and accumulating knowledge, well, in a process of a kind of learning by doing. The establishing regional management platforms is very key, such as the Amazon Regional Observatory in the ACTO, to really help to understand the current situation and how we can improve this. And third, I think it's very important also to recognize the importance to develop a greater intersectorial and territorial coordination to respond to the Amazon needs and priorities. In this context, well, the ACTO permanent national commissions, which are articulating different entities at the national level, focus on the Amazon, are also a very key effort to develop these more comprehensive actions in the Amazon region. So in summary, I think the regional coordination cooperation is very key also to support the achievement of the SDGs in the Amazon region. Thank you, Virgilio.
Thank you, Diego. And your comments, I think three things come to my mind: the importance of prioritization, the regional cooperation, and exchanges of good practices. I think these are very important points to be followed up. I see that Beto is back. So Beto, I'll give you the floor at the end of the round to finish your comments. So let me turn it over to Juan Pablo Bonilla from IDB. Juan Pablo, the floor is yours.
Bom dia, Virgilio. Thank you very much for the invitation. Please give me a signal if the signal is fine. Okay, otherwise I'll switch to my phone. And congratulations for the event. I think it's a very important discussion. Congratulations, Felipe, for the presentation. I'm very happy to see how the center is advancing. And I just wanted to touch a couple of issues, Virgilio. Emma was totally right mentioning the importance of addressing the COVID solution as soon as possible and the economy recovery, because we've seen at the bank, at the IDB, that we are close to lose in less than a year that we have in more than 10 years in terms of reduction of poverty. So I think part of the agenda is how to think about not just going back to normal, because I think we're not going back to normal. It's how to have a more sustainable recovery, very aligned with SDGs. To give you some sense, this year, the IDB prepared 4 prototypes to have fast disbursement to the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean. They were devoted to strengthening the health systems, to support the most vulnerable to populations through cash transfers, non-conditional cash transfers, to support small and medium enterprises, and to provide fast liquidity to the Ministry of Finance. But now we're starting to see how we can be part of that recovery with the Latin American and the Caribbean region. We just have elections at the bank last Saturday. We have a new president starting in October. And I think part of the agenda of the bank for the next years will be how to have a capital increase for the bank to be able to deliver more resources to the region in the next 5 years. Something that was very important for me, looking at the presentation of Felipe, was the number 10 SDG. I think everybody's talking, when we refer to health, about the preconditions that we're facing as humans. And I think what COVID is showing more and more is the preconditions of the region. And I think inequality is showing every day more what we had discussed since the SDGs were approved. We're talking about distance learning, about different measures, and we're just seeing the inequalities in the education system, when most of the population in Latin America, in cities and in rural areas, don't have good connectivity. So the digital transformation that sounded something very fancy a couple of years ago, just to improve productivity and be connected, is becoming just a simple instrument to reduce inequality. Without digital connection in urban and rural areas, we're not going to have that kind of connection that we need right now that COVID is showing. Cities has been a great example for us. Most of the cities of the region have a lot of informality and very poor neighborhoods, informal settlements. COVID has just shown that we need to do way better in creating better cities for the future. For informal people in the region, talking about just, working from home, it's a dream. So we have been, as a region, totally disconnected from an agenda of how to behave in COVID that we need to consider and build way back better for the future. If you see the Caribbean, Virgilio, I was looking at the numbers of Felipe, all the agenda starts to be together for the reconstruction. Everybody in the Caribbean and in vulnerable countries of Central America are talking about social and climate resilience together, building a better tourism. We're just learning that the different cash transfers networks that we have been creating through COVID, just to have fast disbursement to communities, should be maybe the networks in the future to respond to hurricanes, to do the transfers when we have a climate impact in the Caribbean. So there are many lessons learned, but I wanted to emphasize something that was mentioned by Diego and by about territorial approach. And maybe I will use my next intervention to talk more about that. That's part of the solution for the future, to see how rural development and sustainable cities are the transversal way to see how we can advance in SDGs. But I will complement that in the second part. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Juan Pablo. I think you touched on the two key issues for Latin America, which is inequality, which is a long-standing problem that is really a major challenge for the region, and also the issue of cities, because we have become urban society, and there are new challenges and more difficult ones. But thank you so much. Let me turn now to Carlos Musi from CEPAL. Carlos, the floor is yours.
Good morning to all. I'm Carlos Musi. I'm the director of the office of CEPAL of ECLAC here in Brasília. I would like to present the greetings from Ms. Alicia Bárcena. She, the executive secretary of CEPAL. She would like to have been here, but this is a quite busy week for her with all activities of the General Assembly. I would like to greet especially Virgilio, who we've been together many times in different occasions, and to Emma Torres, many years ago in the biodiversity with Carlos Young, all the projects that we had, and also send my greetings and welcome to Ambassador Carlos Lazari in his functions of OTCA. Unfortunately, we haven't met here in Brasília, but let's see if we can meet and put it together, our work program, and also with Diego and all other members. I would like to congratulate Felipe for his work for the SDG index. It's quite useful. I think it's going to be quite important. It had to be from Colombia. Colombia is like the main mother of the SDGs. In 2012, Colombia led the initiative for the SDGs. So congratulations, Felipe. And I think hopefully you have contacts with CEPAL Santiago so we can share data and maybe improve and use your data too in your index. It's quite good. Well, on the general questions that Virgilio put it, certainly COVID is quite a challenge. ECLAC has made our observatory of all actions taken by the countries, and it's quite in the hundreds. Also has meant quite percentage of GDP spent on the issues of COVID-19. But like many have said, without with the vaccine, without new medicine, it's going to curtail us for many years. Let's hope it will be the shortest time as possible. In terms of the SDGs, CEPAL is quite worried, as Felipe has shown well, and my colleague from the IDB has put it. The region is behind. It lacks many instruments. First, before the COVID, was the issue of fiscal space. It doesn't have the access to technology. It starts with a very negative position, with the being the most unequal region of the world. ECLAC or CEPAL is responsible for the regional SDG forum. We've had 3, but the 4th one would be in Cuba, but it has been delayed because of the COVID. But we have our reports. And I think even Felipe has used some of the data, especially one chart which I like very much, which is it tries to show the capabilities of the statistical institutes of generating the SDG indicators in each country. It's quite useful, and it has been an important part of cooperation between the countries. But we need strategy, and I think the role of ECLAC is to bring this strategy. We have right now the idea of a big push for sustainability, or grande impulso para a sustentabilidade. It's going to be presented in our next period of sessions now in October, virtually led by Costa Rica. And in this big push, we bring the 3 pillars of sustainability together. And it's quite important to see how we can bring coordination in public policies. If you look at the data that Felipe has shown us, one of them is more or less the 3 pillars. We see that, for example, the Amazon region does very well, under our standards in terms of the environmental issues, but lags behind in the other pillars, especially economical. So it's quite important to have this, but we need instruments, and CEPAL has these instruments. It will be, for example, either the SDG gateway, which is available for all the data on the SDGs. We have the COVID observatory. We have also the planning observatory with the regional and country plans of planning, which is necessary to guide public policies. And one last issue, which is maybe it's not in this panel, but it's quite important, is in terms of human rights. CEPAL has led the Escazú Agreement, which is to protect the persons who lead movements in environmental and social issues, especially environmental. It's the principle 12 of the Rio Convention of '92, and I wish that we can remember this issue because we need people on the ground defending the issue of the SDGs. Thank you very much, and sorry if I spent a little over the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos, so much. And I think your presentation touches on 2 key points. One is the human rights issues, which are really important in the Amazon. There's a lot of violence, especially around land tenure. And also the issue of the observatory of COVID. Maybe it would be interesting in the second round to see what are your thoughts on having a Zoom on the Amazon countries regarding COVID within the observatory of CEPAL or in partnership with the SDG Center and SDSN Amazonia or other initiatives of our colleagues here on the table. So let me turn it over to Juan Carlos Duque from the United Nations Environmental Program. Juan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Virgilio. First of all, I want to introduce myself. I'm Juan Carlos Duque from the Ecosystems Management Sub-Program from the United Nations Environment Program, Regional Office of Latin America and the Caribbean. I want to extend a special thanks to SDSN for the invitation. And of course, congratulations to Felipe and the SDG Center for Latin America and the Caribbean for all the work that they have been doing. I feel it's really valuable for to try to achieve the SDGs in the region in the next 10 years that we have left. And I just want to start by saying when we're asked about the question of the challenges that the Amazon countries are facing, it's important to understand the Amazon biome itself is very complex in the amount of countries that make it up and the size, the different levels of governance, the fact that around 40% of the Latin American and the Caribbean territory is really the Amazon biome, has over 40,000 species of plants, over 34 million people living inside it, and 380 indigenous populations. So it's immense, and the scale of the challenges is also immense. And one of the main things that we have to think about when talking about these challenges are the direct drivers of biodiversity loss, which affect the Amazon greatly and are exacerbated even because of the different conditions of the ecosystem. When we're talking about changes in land and sea use, direct exploitation of organisms, climate change, pollution, and invasive alien species, these are all very, very present inside the Amazon biome, some more than others. However, they all have a very, very strong presence in the challenges that we face. And when you compound that with the indirect drivers, such as advanced technological innovation, resource use, and per capita consumption, we're faced with a really complex problem that will require integrated solutions. And one of the main challenges that the Amazon is facing right now is the further expansion of the agriculture frontier and the intense resource extraction in the region. And adding to this, of course, something that we see every year, but in the past year, we saw it on a higher level than ever before, is the raging wildfires. Of course, which has a direct relation to the changing climate patterns. And so we have to think about these challenges and understand that there's no one easy, direct solution. And I think that's part of the reason why there is a strong focus in the SDGs, which by design are integrated, which by design don't offer a simple solution to something, or even when we're talking about the environmental, so to speak, SDGs, we have the social and the economic dimensions integrated within them. So I think it's important to remember that and to try to approach the implementation, the achievement of the SDGs in an integrated way, where we always remember when looking for a certain amount of economic progress or social change that these other dimensions have to be included. And a clear example, one of the challenges that we face is SDG 8, about creating decent jobs, about creating jobs that are not exploitative, and properly integrated local communities into these jobs and away from the sectors that are more resource intensive, sectors that have been extracting resources in an unsustainable way, and to more sustainable jobs in other sectors. And then when we think about the way that the pandemic has affected the Amazon or other challenges that we face because of this, it's important to make the relationship between COVID-19 and healthy ecosystems. And for this, we have the UNEP Frontiers report from 2016, where this relationship was already being made about how degraded ecosystems and degraded habitats make it more likely that we will have infectious diseases or zoonotic diseases, that come from degraded ecosystems. So we have to reestablish how we relate to ecosystems and stop this separation from nature, whether it's physical, spiritual, or in terms of how we organize ourselves in terms of environmental work. And even though the climate agenda might want to be relegated because of this strong focus on economic recovery that we're going to have, we must remember that the 2030 agenda is integrated by design, and we can't relegate one or another dimension.
Thank you, Juan Carlos, so much. And I think your point of having an integrated approach and see the interlinkages between the SDGs is a very important one. It's good that you highlighted that. Let me turn it over to Beto to finish with 3 minutes his thoughts. So Beto, the floor is yours.
Okay. I'm just to remind, my first point is there's importance to break down and to kind of zoom in to show how the Sustainable Development Goals actually reflect the Amazonia countries. Amazonia countries the territory can vary from 7 million to up to 8 million kilometers square. Depends on how you define the boundaries. There are about 35 million people living, 25 million on the Brazilian side. GDP, it's probably between 350 billion up to $400 billion. So it's very important because usually the Amazonia territory, I'm trying to emphasize here, including the 8 countries plus the French Guiana, usually perform much worse than the rest of the Latin America. And so it's important to measure those difference between those territory and the others. And I think for this agenda, there is a methodology to do this. I'm not going to but we did in the past using other sustainable, the millennial goals we did, and we split in the 54 province or states. So that's the methodology is there. It's possible to replicate. The data is much better now than used to be. Second, I'm now talking about the Brazilian Amazon side. We need to take into account the question of demography. Interesting because the Brazilian Amazon side, we have a demographic bonus. We have a youth population. The rest of the countries much younger than the rest of Brazil, and for different reasons we are actually missing this opportunity because those people have low access to education and low access to opportunities for job and for economic development. So this might reflect in a lot of other indicators that's present in the Sustainable Development Goals. That's those related to issues that it's dealing with people from 18 years old up to 89 years old. Third element, and I think it'll be interesting to test it, and I think there's a lot of room for this to carry out. It's pilot initiative that in particular among think about the mining companies. Mining companies like Vale, Alcoa, and Hydro, that's 3 mining companies that operate in the Brazilian Amazon, especially in Pará state. Those companies has investment for the lab. Vale can be around here for the next 100 years to 100 years. So those very, very long-term investments. Those 3 companies are, I know because I have contacts there, they are really take serious about sustainable development goals. They want to think about how the sustainable development goal can be used as a guide to drive the social investment the companies made in those territories. Those territories, in this case, it's defined by the boundaries of municipality where those companies operate. The mining operation itself and the logistic corridor that's connected the mining to the logistic destination, a port or something there. So that's 3 major observations that I want to make. That's congratulate Philippe for the great presentation. I'm looking forward to read more in more detail, and I'm very pleased to be around because I think sustainable development goal is a very, very key tool to guide public policy in the region, and to also to really give more visibility for the Amazonian region that was so important for the planet, but it's really lagging behind in terms of social indicator and economic opportunities.
Thank you, Beto, so much. I made a couple of comments on your first remarks, so I'm not going to repeat that here. But I think the point of zooming in is very important. And I think this is probably one of the follow-up issues that we can explore further beyond this seminar today. Maybe you and Felipe and myself, we can see how we can cooperate as DSN Amazonia, the SDG Center, and Amazon and Princeton that you're connected to. And another point about the issue of the Amazon being a young population is an important one, and the issue of the private sector, the role of the private sector in meeting these challenges in the Amazon. Okay, so we finished the round. The good news is that we had a fantastic set of comments. The bad news is that we have lost a little bit of time. So the next round will have only 3 minutes for each, so that we keep our schedule on time. So I'll ask you to be even more concise in your comments. And I'll just repeat the same order. So let me turn it over to Emma had to, I think, got cut off. Let me turn it over to Carlos Lazari, and I'll leave Beto to be the last. So, Carlos, the floor is yours.
Carlos, eu queria, então, voltando, pedindo desculpas de novo por falar em português, eu só queria complementar que o compromisso da OTCA e dos países com, efetivamente, aproximar a nossa agenda estratégica da agenda do 2030. E a nossa agenda estratégica é de 2021 a 2030, portanto, e tem toda uma conexão entre os objetivos de desenvolvimento sustentável e as metas e objetivos da nossa agenda, particularmente em temas, como eu já mencionei antes, com a cooperação de agências internacionais, como eu mencionei, como o BID, cooperação alemã, a PNUMA das Nações Unidas e a Agência Brasileira de Cooperação, que tem sido muito instrumental, sobretudo, em nos ajudar na questão da agenda estratégica, mas também em termos de apoiar a Agência Nacional de Águas, para, juntamente com a ótica, fazer um trabalho integral em matéria de recursos hídricos, e aí também com recursos do GEF e com o apoio da Agência das Nações Unidas para o Meio Ambiente, o PNUMA. Então, nós estamos trabalhando em projetos integrais de recursos hídricos e também incluindo águas subterrâneas, com o mapeamento do aquífero Amazonas, que é um enorme projeto que vai permitir, efetivamente, mudar o rumo da utilização de água potável na Amazônia, que, como sabem todos, é um enorme problema, sobretudo para as populações urbanas da Amazônia, esses 34 a 36 milhões de pessoas que vivem nos territórios amazônicos, né? O outro eixo é bosques e temas florestais, que é um projeto que nós tocamos com muito êxito com o Fundo Amazônia e que agora temos uma segunda etapa que está aguardando uma definição da governança e do diálogo com os países doadores, mas envolve, sobretudo, estações de monitoramento da cobertura. Em diversidade biológica, nós estamos trabalhando com o IPBS, uma metodologia conceptual do IPBS para fazer um trabalho de levantamento da diversidade. Saúde e povos indígenas, já mencionei, um trabalho tradicional, muito bem sucedido e agora renovado com o BID. E o nosso enorme e grande projeto, que é o Observatório Regional Amazônico, que tem a ideia de congregar não só informações oficiais dos países, mas também informações de modo geral produzidas por todos aqueles interessados na Amazônia. Eu diria que, basicamente, isso, e apenas repetir a questão realmente do desafio que é aceder a recursos da cooperação internacional, recursos não reembolsáveis, em função dessa visão equivocada sobre os territórios amazônicos serem de renda média. E também há uma ideia importante que foi lançada pela nossa secretária-geral na cúpula amazônica, que é fazer um trabalho, idealmente com a CEPAL também, sobre o desenvolvimento integral da Amazônia, para permitir justamente que os países, os doadores, possam ter mais interesse em carregar recursos para a nossa região. Muito obrigado.
Ótimo, muitíssimo obrigado, Carlos Lazare, trazendo aí uma visão sobre muitas ações relevantes feitas pela OTCA aqui na região. Então, agora passo ao Diego Pacheco, também da OTCA. So, Diego, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Virgilio. Well, just to complement the intervention of the executive director, well, there are some initiatives that are very focused on helping, facilitating the work of the countries in order to achieve the SDGs in that diversity of areas. But also, I think it is important to highlight the commitment of ACTO to continue working on the development and implementation of a kind of management instruments and tools to foster, to achieve sustainable development in the region. In this sense, we consider that a more active response to the new scenario of COVID-19 in the Amazon region will require a higher capacity of analysis on the multidimensional problems of the Amazon region, and also to ensure a more public investments and also private sector investments for the priorities of the Amazon region. And also, I expressed already the issue of improving the effort for the systematization and organization of the information, good practices that exist at the local and national level in the Amazon region, and also to improve the policy and technical dialogues between the different actors in the Amazon region, public, private, and civil society. So just I wanted to highlight that there is a strong commitment of ACTO to work in these different areas, highlighted already for the executive director. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Diego, for your very concise remarks. Let me turn it over to Juan Pablo, a friend from IDB.
Thank you, Virgilio. To complement what I mentioned before, I think the approach of the territory for the SDGs, and we have talked about this in the past with you and Emma, now with COVID is going to be the way to go. We have to see cities and rural development with different cross-sectoral topics related to social, environmental, and economic SDGs as part of the advancement for the agenda forward. And related to the Amazon, I just wanted to support what Ambassador Lazari mentioned. We have a great opportunity with all the Amazon countries for the future. I think at the presidential meeting in last August, in August 11th, there were two very important messages. The first one is the importance of strengthening OLCA, and the second one was a request, a mandate for the IDB as the Regional Development Bank to formulate in the next months an initiative for sustainable development financing and bioeconomy for Amazon countries. And that means, Virgilio, that we have now a very important request to act in the different areas that all of the panelists mentioned. I think we need to have a holistic view of the Amazon, talking about sustainable cities, talking about sustainable infrastructure, about the need for agroforestry, silvopastoral, ecotourism, connectivity and digital issues. A very important pillar which needs to be social investments related to COVID and education. And something that was mentioned, that is the importance of the private sector. I'm very happy to see how different efforts, like the government of Brazil, how Vice President Mourão is starting to have a multi-sectoral approach for the Amazon, how the private sector, the main banks of Brazil are already saying that they are willing to invest in bioeconomy. And we as a group, IDB group, IDB, BidInvest, and BidLab, we have this very important mandate right now to work in a very coordinated way with OLCA for the future of doing this. And to finalize, Virgilio, there is something that I discussed with you the last time I visited Manaus. We are launching very soon a very pilot program for bioeconomy startups in the Amazon with BidLab. It will be a small effort. It's about $4 million just to accelerate and finance key entrepreneurs. We're going to use that as a pilot that then could be scale up when we have the bioeconomy fund in place. And Greg Watson will talk to you later in another event about that, but I already told my team to include FAST as a very important provider of pipeline for this pilot. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Juan Pablo. You always have good news on your pocket. So it's great to hear that some of those ideas that we've been discussing for a long time are maturing and are ready to take off. And I think it would be great to have a follow-up meeting on this agenda with a focus on the private sector. I think this is an issue that it really can be a game changer. So I'll just take a note of that and we will follow up. Thank you so much. Let me turn it over to Carlos Mussi. Carlos, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Virgilio. Let's start with the private sector. I think you all know the Global Compact of the United Nations, who work with private companies. Many were cited here as large mining companies and things like that. There is a specific initiative for COVID-19, but there is a long-term discussion of the SDGs and how to implement, especially in terms of the environment. So we have an instrument that we can work with the private sector. The companies are certified that agree with the SDGs. So it's something that maybe we can explore later with the Global Compact Brazil, which is headquartered in São Paulo. I would like to add two things. One is the idea of coordination. I think we've talked a lot about different sectors, different forms, and I think one initiative the OTCA has made was try to make a strategic plan. I think that's what is needed here in terms of thinking of the Amazon post-COVID-19. What are the strategy? What is the strategy? What are the instruments? Especially in terms of cooperation between the countries. unfortunately, because of the polarized positions that we're seeing on the Amazon issue, every sector is reactive. Everyone is trying to stand by its side, but it's not really coming up with new proposals. It's either defending what they have done in the past or what it should be. So I think the idea of making a strategy for the Amazon post-COVID is quite important. The other point is on financing. It's going to be hard for the financing company, financing banks, and to try to value the forests. We're going to have to start talking about monetization of the forest. What are the big assets? For example, Mr. Guedes, our Minister of Finance here in Brazil, has tried to almost collateralize the forest in terms of a big investment fund, like they do for real estate. So, we have to be careful on what they propose. So I think that's another issue. And last but not least is once again the issue of people. Unfortunately, the population of the Amazon feels the harder part of the economic and social inequalities, hardness of access, even starting with some basic thing like energy. How can we have sustainable energy given all the persons in the Amazon? Also, we have to, yesterday the president of Brazil blamed fires on the population of the Amazon, but it's really more broader than that. And I think we should have positions on how to deal with the rights of the population of the Amazon region. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carlos. And your point on engaging the private sector, I think, echoes what has been mentioned before by Beto and others. I think the Global Compact is a good actor to be included in this process as well. Very good. So Juan Carlos, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to be very brief. I think one of the solutions we can look at to approach challenges in the Amazon is the fact that it has over 1,000 protected areas that provide ecosystem services for the world. And I think one of the benefits of conserving protected areas is the fact that it can help to achieve SDGs beyond what we commonly associate with the environment, right? Which is, yes, beyond healthy ecosystems and beyond all the goals associated with climate change and life on land. They provide ecosystem services for air quality regulation and pollution control that have direct relation to SDG 3 about health and well-being, and also even something that tends to not be highlighted as much, but as learning and cultural exchange centers, which has a direct relation to SDG 4 about education. And so another important point is to include local communities and indigenous populations, integrate traditional knowledge, building from the bottom up and not from the top down, with impositions of what we feel should be implemented on the ground, which tends not to be too sustainable when we look at it in the long term. Whereas if we build from the bottom up, we're building based on the needs of people on the ground. Something else that's very important is the role of women and the inclusion of a very strong gender dimension. A key SDG is SDG 5 about gender equality. We should aim towards then full participation and inclusion of women in any interventions that we do. Even in this space where most of us are men, the ones that are participating in this panel, I think we all know it's of course extremely important to recognize the role and the voices of women and allow equal participation. It's the same thing in spaces of conservation and integrated management of biodiversity. And apart from that, productive sectors and the integration of biodiversity into productive sectors is extremely important, not just because they depend on the ecosystem services that biodiversity provides in order to function, but because we can make these sectors be more sustainable. And apart from this, I think it's important to highlight greater cooperation amongst countries. And for this, UNEP is developing the regional cooperation program on biodiversity. But also we already have the Leticia Pact that was signed last year, which is a good example of coordinated action against deforestation, for cooperation among research institutions, that more efforts like this should be highlighted. And beyond this, I think it's time to look at other alternatives as we face a crisis as big as COVID-19. And recently, the UN General Assembly released the Harmony with Nature, a report of the Secretary General for the UN General Assembly, where it presents sort of like a paradigm shift from a human-centered to an earth-centered society. And it presents a variety of different options and initiatives without necessarily pinpointing one in particular that have been developing in recent years. Anything from ecological economics, which is linking planetary health and human well-being, and several examples that look beyond GDP, look to a well-being index, to a solidarity economy, and of course, the degrowth movement or the post-growth movement. The idea is to address with this a questioning of societal goals and understand that we are part of nature and that it is possible to improve quality of life, reduce inequality, and improve meaningful jobs without necessarily focusing on the same indicators we have focused on until now.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. And I think your point on protected areas is a very important one, and maybe it's an issue to follow up. There is a perception now in the narrative in the Amazon, especially among more conservative politicians, that the protected areas are bad for the Amazon. So it's very important to face that narrative. But that's an issue that we can follow up later, would be very good. Let me turn it over to Beto to close the session. So Beto, what are your final thoughts?
I will add a little bit more on the private sector to say that usually it's quite straightforward for the private sector to announce commitment on, say, to be neutral or to restore lands. But when it comes to do to announce any goals related to sustainable development or social issues, that's not easy for them. Because how I can actually to explain that by 10 years from now, the company is just going to provide or to achieve sustainable goal number 10, because it's beyond the company's only capacity. So there's always this kind of challenge for them. Reduce extreme poverty. Companies can contribute to that. When they say contribute to that, they become fuzzy, because it's hard for them to say how much they are actually going to do to contribute to reduce extreme poverty by 2030 in one particular territory. So this is an issue that companies are facing when it comes to the social commitments. If you go now, the major companies that operate in the Brazilian Amazonia, there are companies that have shareholders. They already have a lot of commitments on the climate, on things that are more measurable and more easy and more deliverable when you think about the company's own capacity. Take the example of Vale. Vale announced 3 major commitments. One commitment is to get carbon neutral by 2040, to get all energy to become renewable by 2025, and to protect and do restoration 500,000 hectares. But no commitment on the social goals, because it's not because Vale doesn't want, because it's not easy to actually to take one particular goal and to see if the company actually to be able to deliver with their own money and their own capacity. So it's the question of then I think the Sustainable Development Goal can help them to test several ideas, because they are really hungry to think about this beyond what they are thinking today. I'm talking about energy companies, mining companies, agribusiness companies. So there's 3 types of companies that have long-term assets, and they might be able to join a conversation.
Well, excellent. I think it's an excellent point to finish this very rich session. I'm sure we could use more time if we had, but I think the point that you make, Beto, is a very relevant one, and we'll certainly follow up. Today is a day that in this very same time, the large meat company, JBS, has announced a commitment to invest $1 billion until 2030 in the Amazon. But the issue of how to link those commitments to social goals, in addition to environmental ones, is a very good point that you've raised. And let me thank all of you once again, and especially Felipe, who made the opening remarks. And let me turn it over to Victor Salviati, who is going to chair the next session. So Victor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Virgilio and all. Moving to the next section on the Green Economy Coalition Hub. I believe firstly, we are going to have a video on the Together for the Amazon. Okay, so we are not going to have the video, no worries. So good morning, good afternoon to all. I'm Victor Salviati, as Virgilio mentioned, Institutional Development and Innovation Director here at Amazon Sustainable Foundation, FAS. And we are very happy here because FAS is joining the Green Economy Coalition, the world's largest alliance aiming to accelerate the transition to a green economy, to have this international launch of the new Amazon Green Economy Hub. This partnership will enable a creative and fruitful environment to practitioners, investors, policymakers, and enterprises to contribute to the discussion and solutions within the new green economy in the Amazon region. Therefore, I have this amazing task to moderate brilliant people, world leaders, specialists on green economy and sustainable development. Our session is divided in three. Firstly, a global overview on green economy and a dive in on green economy in the Amazon. Secondly, we have an exciting debate to nurture our thoughts. And finally, closing remarks. I will try to keep track on everyone's time for the sake of an efficient and effective session. We'll hear some background noises when your time has finished. Please, panelists, don't think this is personal. Without further ado, I introduce Oliver Greenfield, convener of the Green Economy Coalition, to share with us the global perspective of green economy within this COVID-19 context. Oliver, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, and a very warm Green Economy Coalition welcome to everyone joining this roundtable about the Amazon Too Big to Fail and the launch of our partnership with FAS on the Green Economy Hub. Many of you are joining just now. Some of you have been with us for an hour and a half. If you've not been with us for the first hour and a half, extraordinary, overwhelming of problems, lots and lots of different solutions in different places, and the need for some sort of coherence around them. So I hope my presentation or my conversation starts to move as much more into that solution space, and that's really what I want to share with you. As described, the Green Economy Coalition, the world's largest global alliance for green and fair economies, these problems are too big for individual organizations. We need to work together in partnership, and many of our international partners are joining us today for this session, and some of them are on the panel. I can't name check you all, but thank you very much for joining us and being with us today. A few thoughts to set the scene. The GEC believes that two things: that when you've got to make change, you need an open, inclusive, honest learning dialogue where we commit to consider all voices and all perspectives. And secondly, from that, you grow a shared place of action. We hope these opening conversations that we're hosting here with FAS sends a signal to you that we want to learn with you, act with you, collaborate with you. I will not go into the specific challenges and solutions because our report authored by Steve Bass from IID does a very good job on that, and Virgilio will mention them. But I wanted to answer three questions. The global coalition, why the Amazon? What the GEC wants to achieve here? And thirdly, how do we think we should go about it? So as far as the Amazon, why? Well, it's iconic. It's absolutely iconic. Everybody knows in the world knows the Amazon. And the simplistic story is the Amazon is burning, and all of our futures depend on it not burning. We know that stats, the Amazon deforestation stands at about 17%, and it's estimated to be the negative turning point is about 20% when it starts to spiral into decline. And so we have months to save the Amazon, and by implication, our own selves. So having said that, let's scan out and look globally. COVID ravages us all. And because of it, despite many of the media that suggests we're all breaking apart, we are uniquely and strangely united in that it ravages us all. And we are all somewhat paused. Our vulnerabilities are more pronounced than ever before. Our inequalities are even more raw. And the choices we make are set in a dramatic context that makes them even more profound. And simplistically, there are two polarized choices. The business as usual recovery, get back to growth as quickly as possible, grow at any cost. And in the Amazon, business as usual most likely means burning, deforestation, agricultural expansion, timber, soy, and beef. Cash crops for insatiable global markets, very useful if you're burdened with COVID debt. Let's acknowledge that. The other choice, a green recovery, increasingly discussed, but not just recovery in stimulus, structural green recovery, lay the foundations for greener, fairer economies that reduce risks, improve our resilience, fundamentally recognize our dependency on nature and natural capital, deliver jobs and sustainable livelihoods, particularly for the most vulnerable, and fundamentally stop the behaviors that created COVID in the first place. And if you want to know how to do that, I haven't got enough time to take you through, but please Google the Green Economy Tracker, 20 real integrated green economy policies that exist around the world. But we know, even with COVID hanging over us, in pretty much all political economy conversations around the world, in every nation, you don't get far on the economics of avoiding future crises. In other words, the economy, the Amazon as a global and climate biodiversity asset does not hold enough sway or yet produce enough revenue. The green economy recovery arguments must answer the questions of growth, jobs, revenue, cash flow, debt, and so it is everywhere. And so it is in the Amazon. Okay, well, we see the Europeans are committing to their answer. We see the European Green Deal, probably the most comprehensive systemic intervention on this transition that we can see. The Chinese announced this week their plans for peak carbon by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060. In November, we shall see the path the American people choose. From that, will a new triumvirate emerge to help green transition? And what would this mean for Brazil? What could it mean for Brazil? Will it be a global climate pariah or a global green new economy powerhouse? Those choices are ahead of us. The good news for us, all international community, and for the Amazon, is if you look hard enough, there is an emergent green economy answer here in the place that we need it most, and that is the Amazon bioeconomy, a local, context-specific green and fair recovery, one that recognizes dependency on nature, natural capital, one that creates livelihoods, revenues, jobs, economic, social, and environmental progress. It stops the burning. And specifically, the approach we are championing focuses on making standard forests more valuable for local communities and livelihoods than cut. So we, the international community, must help to make this a success for the benefits of the people of the Amazon and the benefits of the global green economy community and for everyone. So what do we want to achieve here in this work? Well, avoiding failure is number one, but think big, think big. The Amazon say, Brazilian, a green economy powerhouse. Here on the global stage, the global green economy starts to win and inspire forest-based economies around the world and other national green economy transitions. And by thinking big, we're talking about key interventions that will move the economy from a deforestation to an inclusive green one, moving from finance, loans to single commodities to more diverse local finance, more diverse livelihoods. Moving from an economy that has a high dependence on external inputs, suffers from low productivity and low local value, to one that mobilizes local knowledge and systems, that requires a dialogue policy process that connects all stakeholders to assess trade-offs and compensates adequately. moving from an economy run by that benefits the few to one that is led to consultation with local people, businesses, and the public. And this means an inclusive and participatory decision-making process through structured dialogue and an accessible platform. And finally, this successful, iconic green affair solution that is emerging here in the Amazon is important for us to collaborate globally. This is the international launch of this. There will be a Brazilian launch in Portuguese and a regional launch in Spanish, but we've invited many of our international community colleagues here, and I encourage us to think about collaboration, not just in Brazil, but also about the enabling conditions. And we think this is how we will want to take this work forward. First of all, collaboration. Let us work together. Let us listen to each other, understand each other, and find those commonalities. Find that joined up solution. Help us tell this story. We are focusing on the Amazon because it is the story of a moment, of COVID, of recovery, and absolutely central to that transition success for the world. Let us create the global conditions for the Amazon bioeconomy to go to scale. Practical examples, international colleagues. And I'll give you one practical example on that from an international perspective. You know, when the GEC opens up this conversation and passes it to Virgilia in a minute, one thing the GEC commits to do immediately, apart from tell the story and work with FAS in the Amazon, on the international stage, we have a lot of work in the European Union. We've been very supportive of the Green Deal, but we shall remind the EU that the ratification of the trade deal between the European Union and Mercosur must depend on both the halt of the Amazon deforestation and the increased provision in the Treaty for Amazon bioeconomy products and services. So we can do something on the other end of the pipe to make the enabling conditions really more conducive to the success of bioeconomy. And this is an inspiring opportunity to see a locally grown, context-specific green economy in action, described as bioeconomy in the Amazon region. And we think that that starts to link up many of the other points that were made in the previous session about financing, business, the local communities, really bringing those together into a coherent vision. So let us share the vision and see how we can make it a success together. And with that introduction, we're delighted to be working with FAS. We'd be delighted to work with all of you, and we look forward to this conversation, collaboration, and hope it's the first of many. And I pass the floor to our Amazon hero, FAS and Virgilia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Oliver, for these inspiring thoughts. The opportunity of the green recovery, as you mentioned, is something very on the table, and also to coordinate this global effort, not just for the green economy, also to save the Amazon, if I may say. Thank you very much for that. Now I bring Virgilio Viana, General Director of Sustainable Amazon Foundation. For the next 20 minutes, Virgilio will present the Amazon Green Economy Hub's strategy. Virgilio, the screen is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Victor, and it's great to make this presentation right after Oliver, who has been together with Steve Bass, a partner in designing this green economy hub for the Amazon. And so this is formally for us a global launch of this green economy hub for the Amazon, which aims to transform the Amazon economy from a deforestation-driven to a deforestation-free and inclusive and green economy. Just a very quick overview on Amazon issues. It's important to realize that we have two geographies that oftentimes are mixed together, not explicitly. One is the Amazon biome, and the other is the Amazon basin. They're all very large, but they do not coincide one with the other. The Amazon basin is the watershed, the biome is the ecosystem that includes mostly forests, but not only forests. A little bit on the geography, Brazil is the largest, about 2/3, but not the only country. So we have to remember that Peru, Bolivia, Colombia, Venezuela, Guyana, Suriname, Ecuador, and French Guiana all represent a very important part of the Amazon. It's also important to know that these different regions, these different countries have different proportions of the basin and the biome. While Guyana has 0 on the Amazon basin, 100% of its territory is in the biome, which is quite different from other countries. So it's very important to realize this heterogeneity within the Amazon regions, or countries, sorry. In terms of numbers, everything in the Amazon is superlative. Billions of tons of water per day, 10% of plant species, 25% of the ocean sequestration and terrestrial ecosystems, 15% of the water. And in terms of the water, it's very important, the role of the Amazon as a provider of ecosystem services to the rest of South America and also to other regions of the world. So the hydrology of the Amazon is becoming more and more well known, and that highlights the importance of the Amazon as a sort of an air conditioning for the world and a recycler of water. It's also home of some 34 million people with 300 plus indigenous peoples, some of them in voluntary isolation, about 30. And these cultural heterogeneity is also very unique of the Amazon in terms of diversity of languages, of cultures, and of landscapes as well. We have to consider that the headwaters of the Amazon is located in a desert mountain area in a peak in Peru, and goes down to flooded forests and downstream in other parts of the region. So it's very heterogeneous. In terms of its emergency, the deforestation and forest fires globally account for 12 to 20%, depending on the year and the measurements and so on. In Brazil, it's the largest part of the emissions of the country, and it's increasing. Cattle ranching is the most important driver of deforestation, economic driver. It's important to realize that deforestation is a part of an economic machinery of a certain business as usual economic scenario. And we like to say that the Amazon is too big to fail. If we think of the small banks of Wall Street, they are minute compared to the global relevance of the Amazon. So we have to give more importance to the Amazon as a key aspect of our common future. And it's interesting that there are two sides of this story. One is the tragedy of the increase of forest fires and deforestation, which is becoming worse over the last several years. But also, on the other side, we have an engagement of societies in general more strongly with the Amazon challenges than before. So the engagement of investors, bankers, CEOs, and society in general, which is becoming increasingly concerned. It's important to know that the overwhelming majority of Brazilian population is against deforestation in the Amazon. And we're close to a tipping point. We don't know exactly when this tipping point is happening, if it's already on the way. My personal perspective is that there are some regions of the Amazon that have already passed the tipping point. The tipping point is not going to be uniform across the region. The deforestation rates vary over time, but we have to consider that there is a trend of increasing deforestation. Brazil is the largest part of this. Natural forest is going down in the region. Let me just finish this first quick overview by saying that this tragedy of deforestation and expansion of the agricultural frontier is not only an environmental one. We have an increasing violence. The number of leaders, environmental defenders that have been killed is increasing. Last year we have about 70 leaders murdered, and this trend is increasing, unfortunately. So there is a very strong social cost in addition to the environmental problems associated with the expansion of the agricultural frontier. Let me look at the issue of green economy, and we have divided in 4 key themes: financial flows. In the deforestation scenario, the finance and loans are limited to beef, soy, and other commodities. What we need is new finance mechanisms that favor small and medium enterprises and green services, and also financial flows that account for environmental and social risks. So we need new mechanisms. We need blended finance mechanisms to incentivize green and inclusive business. In terms of measurement and governance, in the deforestation-driven economy, there are some islands of green economy, but there is a sea of failure dominated by business as usual, deforestation-driven economies. So for an inclusive green economy, we need new policy and governance rules to incentivize green activities and penalize deforestation-driven economies. So we need transformative interventions on research that includes research on policy and management options. And we need to disseminate this across different sectors and to overcome the constraints. Another axis is the value chains and production processes. The deforestation-driven economy is based on illegal and unsustainable deforestation. Sometimes is also legal, so we have both, and that's something which needs to be changed. And the green economy view is that we need to value Amazon assets that are nurturing the world. We need natural capital accounting and approaches to track and stocks and flows of these goods and services. There are commodities, especially in the mining sector, that are based on single activities. We need to give more value to sustainable forest products and services as a part of a green economy strategy. And the interventions that we foresee include the modeling, economic strategic options against the green economy criteria, and especially with a focus on payment for environmental services, and also value in recognizing traditional knowledge. And this is particularly important for bioeconomy, and it'd be great to hear from our panelists how we can use existing instruments to foster bioeconomy in the Amazon, especially in the use of phytotherapy options that we have based on traditional knowledge. And finally, on the political economy, the deforestation pathway has a high dependence on external inputs, and that means fertilizers, agrochemicals. Brazil is the #1 user of agrochemicals, and some of them with high toxicity. So that has also an additional impact. And if we look through a green economy lens, we need policies that create more jobs, that are more job intensive, to tackle the issue of inequality, which is a very important issue for Latin America as a whole, but especially for the Amazon. And our transformative interventions that we foresee is fostering political dialogue, connecting stakeholder groups, and to explore different options. And in another component of this is that the policies are usually led by a small elites that capture the results of commodities, and we need to engage other groups that are not benefiting from those commodity-driven development, so that they are benefited from more inclusive economic pathway. This is a view that we would like to share with you all, and also hear your thoughts. Just a backdrop on the two founders of this initiative. The FAS is a 12-year-old organization based in Manaus. We're the largest civil society organization of the Amazon. We work directly with 11 million hectares and through a program that's called Standing Forest, Floresta em Pé, which is a follow-up of the Bolsa Floresta program. And we have been able to have significant achievements in terms of reduction of deforestation and increasing income. The other partner is the Green Economy Coalition, that is represented here by Oliver, who has just spoken, which is the largest global movement for green and fair economies, that convenes civil society, business, workers, and government and UN organizations together with academics to accelerate a transition to green and fair economies that is focused on connecting and communicating and influencing actors to move towards a green economy. This is the network of the Green Economy Coalition. So we are very happy to be a part of that ecosystem. And the hub, the Green Economy Hub for the Amazon, or Amazon Green Economy Hub, has a mission of radically scaling up a people-centered and sustainable set of activities that makes forests worth more standing than cut, as a strategy to reduce deforestation and forest fires, and also promote forest restoration and social justice. So it's a very ambitious mission, but we want to have a very focused approach. And the strategy is based on connecting Amazon institutions to the global network of green economy. So that's our #1 strategy. #2 is to become a knowledge hub on green economy approaches and solutions that work. This is going to build on our experience with SDSN, Sustainable Development Solutions Network for the Amazon, which already has a platform on solutions for the whole region, including all the 9 countries. The third strategy is the empowerment of Amazon institutions, the theme of capacity building and learning, which is a major challenge for the Amazon. And we think that COVID in a way has helped people become more familiar with the long distance learning. So this is going to be an important area of progress. Dialogue and policy development, engage directly with policy reform, making use of opportunities of governments at all levels, at national level, at state and municipal level of all countries of the Amazon. So we want to be very opportunistic and reach out to governments that are willing to move forward in the green economy agenda. And finally, supporting bioeconomy enterprises that need to be scaled up through support of Amazon business incubators. The good news is that there's already a very good network of business incubators in the Amazon, and the hub is going to work together with those existing institutions to foster bioeconomy enterprises. So the idea of the hub is not to centralize, but rather act as a network. So this is the view of the Green Economy Hub, linking policy, business, finance, academia, and civil society together with the idea of giving value to these treasures of the Amazon. This is a picture of Pirarucu that is always useful to remind the richness and the potential for bioeconomy in the Amazon. And we should also make a distinction between bioeconomy and green economy. Bioeconomy, I like to define as Amazon bioeconomy, meaning those value chains that are based on Amazon native biodiversity. So when we talk about Amazon bioeconomy, we're not including commodities like soybeans and so on. We're focusing on Amazon biodiversity as a source of economic development. And for discussion, there are three questions that we would like to raise and listen and learn from the panelists and also from the audience. We have a very rich audience, and I'd like to invite everybody to send comments and suggestions and ideas that we can move forward. This is really going to be a collective action. It's more like a network that we're building on existing processes that are taking place in all Amazon countries. We have very good relationships with our colleagues in Colombia, in Ecuador, in Peru, and Bolivia. And we're looking forward to expanding our connections with other countries as well, that we already have partners in Venezuela, Guyana, Suriname, and French Guyana. But the issues is, what are the challenges facing green economy in the Amazon? What are the best strategies to scale up those initiatives that you think are relevant? And then have a view for the long term. How does success look like? What could be our targets? And also, how can we mobilize resources and partnerships to reach those targets in 5 years and in 2030? 5 years would be a sort of a mid-term achievement. And with this, I'd like to finish exactly on time. Thank you so much, Victor. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Virgilio. Much appreciated. It's always good to listen to Virgilio, because in his presentation, we learn very much. And I'm not saying this just because he's my boss, but is really true. And I'd like to highlight three things from Virgilio's presentation. Firstly, strategy brought engagement. So this is very, very strong. The second thing is, we're not just talking about deforestation itself, but also illegal deforestation. Some people comment that on the chat. And finally, the bioeconomy definition for the Amazon. We're talking about not sugarcane, soybean, just kind of things, but we're talking about native species for this Amazon bioeconomy. So having heard these global and Amazon's perspectives, we will hear now the 5 high-level panelists in a 2 round of questions. As Virgilio presented before, seconds ago, in the first round, we are going to have 5 panelists talking about 5 minutes to address 2 questions. Question number 1, again, what are the key challenges for the Amazon Green Economy Hub? And the second question, what is the best strategy, or what are the best strategies to scale up this inclusive and global green economy for the Amazon? We will start with Isabella Teixeira, former Brazilian minister. Isabella led successful actions that contribute to slash deforestation here in the Brazilian Amazon. Isabella, we are very pleased to have you here with us, and we are eager to hear from you about the challenges and opportunities considering your perspectives as a policymaker.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me, and it's so nice to see good friends. And I try to provoke here a political approach considering what you have today in Brazil. And in short-term perspective, you have this challenge to stop the setbacks that unfortunately we have to manage today, but also in the other side of the coin, how we can move into the future, and indeed how green economies and the umbrella of green economies will support us in these transitions, and also how this also will influence or to reshape international cooperation. This is very important to observe, because my feeling is that we are changing, and not only in Brazil, but at the global level. And after the post-COVID crisis, as mentioned before in the first panel, we have other interests that will come into the global agenda on climate change and biodiversity, et cetera, et cetera. And Amazonia is absolutely strategic to not only bring solutions for Brazil, but also to address strategic solutions for the world. So we need a new business as usual, okay? And this is really important. If Amazonia can go into this agenda, consider this hub initiative and other ones that they are managed, because Amazonia is a wicked problem, and we need to avoid this war of narratives that we have today, and indeed be affirmative, consider the new political and economic narrative that we want to become a reality, a new business as usual. So what indeed, if I can provoke you, Virgilio, as I used to like too much, but I think that we need to think not only from deforestation driven to deforestation free. We need also in the future to consider the conservation driven, because how to build development based on conservation. And it's not only considered the bioeconomy, as you mentioned before, and green economies that we are discussing here, but indeed how we can use our assets, important political goals or outcomes like ARPA program, okay, and also what you have today with stand forest challenges, also the new Zona Franca de Manaus, everything that we're discussing, looking forward to address solution. Then how can you use this under the conservation umbrella development? Why this? Because Brazil needs something really new, consider our challenge for development, because we promote our development based on the destruction of the Atlantic forest. We lost one tropical forest. We don't need to lose a second tropical forest. So indeed, this is something for this century, how we can use this image to build based on conservation. Of course, that we have trade-offs. That's why I mentioned that we have a wicked problem in Amazonia, and we need to make clear what are the non-issues, what are the issues. Non-issues is considered the political world, is what we have solutions. For example, deforestation, it's not necessarily it's as a consequence is a strategic issue, but as a national issue, it's a non-issue because it's law enforcement. It's not based on the need to renew economic activities. This is something really unfair, okay? This is based on criminality. So we need to understand what are the how we can manage known issues to avoid this into the future, but how we can manage today the future, the strategic issues that must be addressed. For example, Amazonia as part of a global solution, as a global commons. Okay, not because of Amazonia, but the contributions of Amazonia for global commons. We have this new debate today in the world coming exactly to review the political and economic debate based on commons. So I think that we need to understand also the importance of this initiative and of Amazon as a part of the better future for Brazil. Brazil today we have really important political images, as you mentioned, that Brazilian society support initiatives to protect Amazonia, but Brazilian society doesn't know Amazonia and doesn't know how Amazonia indeed will contribute for our future. Okay, and my political perspective is that I would like, I know that we have another question to do this, but how we can move from a big problem that's not only for Brazil, based on deforestation, for a big solution that the planet, a lot of countries, many countries know about this, but not necessarily Brazil knows about how we can have a big solution in Amazonia that will contribute for a better future for our Brazil development and Brazil society. This is very important because you need to connect Amazonia to Brazil. It's not only Amazon Basin, as you mentioned, really, but I think that we need to understand how we can use this international consensus about the importance to protect Amazonia and how we can move forward, consider the challenge of development. Of course, that I have another comments to add, but the last one is we need also to understand green economy ownership in Amazonia. And I like that you separate or try to separate the roads, but I'm fully, as a co-chair of the International Resource Panel, we are fully engaged to discuss this new economy, circular economy. And in the recent debate in Amazonia, you have a new concept, circular bioeconomy. So it's so innovative for me. When I read this, I thought, what is this? And it's very interesting how indeed local solutions or local needs and national needs will address this connection and probably being what I call a local ownership that will indeed make sense at the political global level. So these are my first considerations. I know that I don't have much time, and thank you very much for inviting me again to join you in this important dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabella, for these head starts. Isabella has focused and stressed a lot of the challenges, and two that I made the point here is the war of narratives, and this has to be addressed by science, and it's a shame that we have to emphasize that nowadays in the 21st century. And the second is the deforestation-free going towards the conservation-based models of development. So very good, Isabella, for that. Now I turn to a very close friend, Jamie Irving, from the Global Program on Nature of Development at the UNDP. She leads the UNDP's Equator Initiative that connects government, civil society, business, and grassroots organizations to recognize and advance local sustainable development solutions. Jamie, good to see you again. And we'd like to hear your thoughts on a strategy for the bioeconomy and the economy bring up solutions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victor, and congratulations to you and Virgilio and the team for the launch of this incredibly important and exciting initiative. I'd like to pick up on 5 themes that I read in the report, Too Big to Fail. First is the broken economic model. The Financial Times had a single sentence front page last year that read, "Capitalism, it's time for a reset." The biggest challenge is that the prevailing economic model, which is based on a frontier economy in many parts of the Amazon, doesn't recognize the value of biodiversity. It thrives on market failures. We spend more than $600 billion on agricultural subsidies, many of which drive unsustainable practices. And until we change those, the market failures will persist. The good news is that we are already seeing signs of change. The newly formed Task Force on Nature Disclosure, which will be launched at the Nature for Life Hub this Friday with 50 major corporations, is starting to change the discourse on nature. And it's making the destruction of nature a material risk. We're also seeing the emergence of technology that can hold corporations accountable for the loss of biodiversity. And I predict that within 5 years, the technology that we need for deforestation future will be here. The second point are the short-term time horizons, whether it's finance or planning, resource management or markets. The prevailing political economy prioritizes short-term gain. This time horizon is incompatible with a bioeconomy or green economy. We need corporations to foster long-term supply chains, and we're already seeing signs of hope. Let me just give you two examples. We have two Equator Prize winners, the Federación Tribus Pech de Honduras, which produces liquid ambar that has sustainable green contracts with Maine Incorporated, one of the world's largest suppliers to the fragrance trade, long-term agreements in the 10 to 20-year range. And then last year, the Asociación de Productores Camito Ine in the Peruvian Amazon won the Equator Prize for producing certified organic cacao for the Australian and European market. So we need to see a transformative paradigm shift in how corporations do business with communities. It's great that Mars and JBS are each investing $1 billion in the sustainable supply chain. I'd really like to see some of that money flow to local communities in the form of long-term capacity and long-term commitments. Third is global demand. The productive processes of the three basic commodities that drive 60% of forest loss that Virgilia mentioned, beef, soy, timber, these are linked to insatiable global demand. Even when we see some regional markets such as Europe add pressure for sustainable demand, we see other parts of the world snap up existing supply. So the solution here is that we need more global commitments for deforestation-free commodities, such as the New York Declaration on Forests, which already has 200 endorsers. We need more. We also need to start shifting demand in many cases for beef alternatives and timber alternatives. The fourth is finance and capital asymmetry. There's a missing middle in finance. We work with a number of large investors who tell us we don't get out of bed for under 100 million, yet most micro, small, and medium enterprises need somewhere between 1 and 10 million. The high cost of due diligence means that investors aren't interested and finance does not flow to MSMEs. To tackle the missing middle, we need to develop finance mechanisms that aggregate capital, bring de-risking capital, and find new ways to get finance to MSMEs. Some examples exist, including the ABC Fund and Rabobank. UNDP is working on one. I hope that we also see the growth of local and national crowdsource investing as a new way to bring capital to MSMEs that are local. And finally, the fifth element from the report that I took out was the economic exclusion. And the current system really benefits big business, especially agribusiness, who enjoy a monopoly on markets. We need to foster an explosion of micro, small, and medium enterprises through incentives, through capacity support, through technology and incentives, and also through incubators. And this is what's most exciting about the initiative. Back over to you, Victor.
Thank you very much, Jamie, showing off her Spanish. Thank you very much. So she mentioned two things that I think is very nice to share and highlight actually for you. Firstly, to put nature as a material issue within the company. So the acronym ESG, environmental, social, and governance. People are talking a lot about this. So this is very, very important. And this is very connected with this global demand. Jamie brought the UN Declaration for Forests. So we have to have more people on board. And by that, we have to be more people engaged by this call of action. Thank you again. Now, bring another multilateral perspective. I invite Gregory Watson from the Natural Capital Lab at the IDB. Watson leads an ecosystem of innovation for the conservation, landscape, biodiversity, and marine ecosystem finance. Watson, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Victor and Virgilio. It's great to see you, and congratulations on this initiative, which when I saw the documents, really seemed to me to hit all of the main challenges that we see in the Amazon region. And Jamie actually just mentioned several of the points that I would have made about some of the challenges. So I might dive into what I think some of the solutions might be and some of the things that are being worked on in the region. I think that what we see is that this need for new financial mechanisms and the missing middle is really key. If in the diagnosis that we've done, we do see that the investors are out there, they're looking for projects, but the pipeline is very weak. The existing, there's a lot of existing accelerators and incubators, but they may be getting companies, to a certain stage, and that they can't find that missing 1 million to 10 million. What we've seen is, what we're working on at the IDB is that connection amongst the different accelerators and incubators in the different Amazon countries is really important. And if this platform can be a way to have a single point that can diffuse through that network, I think that it really helps to aggregate deals and businesses into a way that they can actually perhaps be made attractive for investors. And then the other thing that we're working on is to work with local fund managers in Brazil and in the Amazon to create these risk capital missing middle funds. And so I think we've seen too often that the funds that are available are only debt or only guarantees or only equity. And really what we need are funds that have 2 tranches of reimbursable money and maybe some grant money that can provide simple agreements for future equity, that can provide reimbursable grants, contingent recovery grants. And so we're creating an accelerator for the Amazon region right now that should be approved very shortly to provide that kind of capital. And we really look forward to working with you and with the enterprises that you're finding through the hub to create those linkages so that those businesses can receive financing. Because for me, until we can get a bridge over this kind of chasm of finance, we're not going to have the businesses coming up from below that come from the indigenous communities and the local communities that can really make an impact. I also think looking at national institutions, and I think somebody else mentioned this, that can be used to tackle this market and this problem is important. We've been working with a lot of second-tier financial institutions across the Amazon region, and currently in Peru is the most advanced with the project at the IDB, to create bioeconomy investment funds that are at the national level that can be 20, 40, $100 million that second-tier banks can then deploy through microfinance organizations, through banks, directly through equity, that can do some of this also bridging of maybe the larger size of that 1 to 10 million ticket to the investors. We've kind of created a mechanism to do this in Peru with COFIDE, and we're now looking at other countries like Ecuador and Colombia. But I think that when we can piggyback on the core competency of existing organizations in a country, it saves us a lot of time, energy, and actually institutionalizes faster. And so in as much as those kinds of actors can be brought into the hub, I really think that that's a great way forward. And the emphasis on connection of the hub, I think, is really key. Linking the investors with the projects, but also linking individual projects where we can see maybe more efficiency. If 2 businesses or 2 NGO projects that are working in the same area, maybe using the same kinds of intellectual assets or research assets, but they don't even know what they're doing in territory. And so how can we foster a broader engagement among those institutions to move away from a kind of a competitive lens of competing for funding to a collaborative lens of institutions working together to solve a problem? We're working on some technology platforms to do that. But I think that all of us here probably have, if we did some soul searching, could see that this is something that we all need to do better in our organizations in terms of collaboration. The emphasis on natural capital accounting and shifting to a new model, I also think is important. We are not adequately incorporating the value of nature into business decisions or into investment decisions. And I think that we need to be bold and experiment with different kinds of ways to do that. I mean, we've had payment for ecosystem services in the past, and there's various different models, but one thing we've been working on is a stock exchange for the value of natural capital, where you sever the value of the natural capital basically from the actual asset itself. It's almost, think about air rights above a building. And then you can actually sell that in an IPO for people who want to store value. Instead of storing it in Bitcoin or gold or art, they could store it in a share of a pristine ecosystem, or they could store it in a share of the, we're working with a large corporate where they're doing biodiversity and kind of climate friendly production instead of their traditional business as usual. And you can actually quantify the value of that in terms of natural capital and sell that in an IPO, and people who are aligned with investment strategies can do that. So, you know, I also wanted to talk a bit about bonds and others, but I hear the chime, and maybe I can talk about that in the next session.
Thank you very much, Watson, for that connecting not just with the missing middle that Jamie has brought, but also the national strategy that Isabella brought earlier. So make my job here as a moderator much easier. I'd like to pinpoint one thing that highlight actually one thing that you mentioned that it's very interesting to hear from the bank. To be bold, you mentioned the stock exchange for natural capital. So instead of investing my money, not my money because I don't have it, but investing money on Bitcoin, I can invest and have a forested hectare protected land. So this is very, very unique, and it's good to hear again from the bank on that. And now I'd like to move to Asad Nadik from the Partnership for Action on Green Economy page. He coordinates an amazing team that guides strategic program development and oversees its implementation within the UN bodies. Asad, what's your takes on challenges and opportunities from the green economy?
Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting us to this discussion. So PAGE is a partnership of 5 UN agencies. It brings UNEP, UNDP, ILO, UNIDO, and UNITAR together to support countries and regions on greening their economies. So time is very short here. And so I will put the challenges into 2 big categories. So one category is the root causes. And I think that's important to look at them because they are usually overlooked. And these are the ones which set the rule of the game, which we are playing and losing. As Virginia said, I think we have islands of green economy, but seas of failures everywhere. And where we have the island, it's where, you know, we keep putting more money through projects or development assistance or through banks. But as soon as we stop putting the money, the greening of economy is gone. So I think the first root cause that I see for this is the way the global system of measuring progress, measuring development, and measuring success has been set. So whatever we do, everything has to be measured against a monetary number, a number, and then it's valuable or it's a success or it's a failure. And that's why I think we are happy to see that, you know, natural capital accounting and inclusive wealth, to which UNEP has been part from the beginning, is now starting to emerge. But you can see how many challenges we are facing in just changing the system of how do we measure success. It's even worse in the private sector where, you know, finance is the only measure. And that's why finance as a sector has become super important on how the direction of economy will take. And that is my second challenge, that the global financial architecture at the moment, and we looked at it through the inquiry into the global financial architecture, is not made for sustainable development. It is made to create more wealth and more financial capital. And in most of the cases, that is another root cause of the challenge, that for a bank to invest in things like Amazon, it's very hard for the project managers to justify it. And only justification is if it's financially competitive investment. So all other types of investments or all other type of returns are less important. So I think we need to change the global financial architecture, and some work has started through the UN system, but I think it's spreading, and now we have many more partners, and we heard some examples from the bank. Now, the third root cause of the challenge I see is the national development and economic planning. That unsustainable economy, an economy which is inherently gray, which is inherently exclusive, which inherently creates inequalities, is the defining characteristics of national development plans or economic policies. Because the only thing we want to achieve is the success, and success is measured in numbers of jobs, numbers of growth, numbers of money, numbers of GDP, etc. And that leads to another challenge, which is also a root cause, which is the confused development assistance. So much of the work that we do and you do and happening in Amazon is coming from the same development partners and development assistance organizations who are financing coal mining somewhere, who are financing fossil fuel extraction somewhere, who are financing brown economy in other parts of the world. Probably, I wouldn't say it, but probably it's also true for the finance sector too, that 90% of the portfolios are normal portfolios, which in our view are, leading to more brown economy. And then there are 10% which are for green economy. So you will see the result will also be the same, that 90% of the economy will be moving into brown direction, and there will be islands of green economy, which are 10%. And then my last point on the root causes or systemic challenges is we have lost the direction on green economy. So we started to create an economy whose growth will be driven by policies and investments that will lead to address global sustainability and social challenges. And what we have ended up is, in many cases, doing some small waste management projects here and there. So I think we need to address these systematic causes. There are ways, there are visible symptoms that are also important to discuss. So deforestation in Amazon, pollution, global warming, loss of biodiversity, zoonotic disease. These are just the symptoms. So we take the two together, but I'm not saying one is important. Now, what we need to do, I'm sorry, I'm taking a bit more time, but I think we need to reset the economy is right, and COVID has provided this opportunity. Over the next 18 months, decisions that we take will decide whether Amazon is saved or Amazon is lost. And we have now $20 trillion on the table in recovery funds. And that is more than the money that we were asking for SDGs. I think we need to have more ideas of these hubs, which can bring policymakers, financiers, private sector, civil society, academia together, build partnerships. And PAGE is a partnership, and we are so proud of our humble contributions that we have made to change the whole of the UN system thinking about green economy. Number 3, take the models, and we have a couple of models in Amazonia, and scale them up. My last 2 points, and I'm sorry I'm taking a bit more time. One is sustainability strategy. You have built a hub. Think how it will continue at its own momentum so that it is not lost when the financial support stops to come in. Link the sustainability agenda with jobs, inequality, etc. That might help. And my last point is align the whole of finance system with greening economy, with saving the Amazon. This piecemeal approach of bankable projects will only get us so far, but it will not turn the table where we will set the redirection of the economy from brown to green. There are many other ideas from the 10 policy paper that get coordinated, and we are very proud of our humble contributions to that. And I'll be happy to give answers to questions if there are any. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Asad. You can have the time that you need about just show us how to get the 12 trillion US dollars for the recovery. I think it's one thing that gets on me here. But one other thing that you mentioned about the inequality, you mentioned this word several times, and I think it's important to highlight what Virgilio mentioned before, that one of the goals or the approach of this hub is to decrease inequalities here in the Amazon, bring all stakeholders together. So not just scholars and investors, but also local leaders and local communities, indigenous leaders. So, and then we can have a very strong and robust network. I'm very happy to see that we have a lot of friends here connected with us. Adriana Moreira, for instance, Thomas Lovejoy, Martin Locke, and much others. We are very pleased, so you can comment and share your thoughts at the chat. So moving to the last panelist, I invite Claude Gascon from the Global Environmental Facility. He oversees a team of experts working to to support developing countries to tackle biodiversity loss, climate change, and land degradation. So Gascon, heading GEF Amazon programs, what do you see as a challenge and opportunities for the hub and the green economy? Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Victor, and good afternoon or good morning to everybody. Thanks to Virgilio and FAS for inviting the Global Environment Facility to participate in this very important and timely launch of a great initiative. We're very happy to learn about this and perhaps be a partner. Let me just start by putting out a kind of beacon on the hill of what we are collectively trying to achieve, and I'll say it in my words. I'm sure it could be said in different words, but from my perspective, what we're really trying to achieve is to maintain a functioning and resilient Amazon biome that will provide for sustainable human and economic development. And we're now at a point where we're kind of experimenting with new concepts of green economy, bioeconomy, circular economy. And in reality, none of these are defined. There's no recipe cookbook for any of these. So we're kind of defining them as we go. One thing that I am convinced now, and it may not be shared by everybody, is that all of these new concepts, for them to be successful, we're not talking about the sustainable development model of the last 30 years, which has been based on 3 pillars: environment, social, and economic development. We've learned that we can't maximize 3 different opposing directions and themes. And usually, what we've seen is that the environment pillar is the one that gets treated with less respect. I think we're looking really at a new model that really puts natural capital and the health of the environment at the center of all development. So we're no longer talking about a three-legged stool, but rather a central environmental health component that will allow for sustainable and economic, social, and economic development. So the goal of what we're talking about really is to, how do we change the trajectory of economic and social development by putting nature at the center of all development. The good news, and the Jeff is very much involved in investing in the Amazon because of this. In the Amazon, we really have some time. Maybe not a lot because of what science is telling us in terms of tipping points, but we have an ecosystem and a biome that is still relatively intact compared to many other areas in the world, where we can still influence the trajectory of development in this huge region. So I would say that some of the main challenges have already been mentioned, but I could just restate some of them. First of all, we need to stabilize the status of the Amazon. This means zero deforestation, the active conservation and management of existing protected areas, restoring key degraded lands. And we also need to plan productive land uses within a landscape that is inclusive of these other land uses and not production against conservation. We also, and this was said very eloquently by most panelists, we need to change the economic incentives. We have perverse incentives in some instances. We need to promote positive incentives for conservation. We need to build governance at local and regional scales for this different development model, whatever it turns out to be. The green economy will require new levels of governance, new levels of capacity, and I would argue new political institutional architectures. And I would hope that Isabella would agree with me, where we need to bring the ministries and institutions of public governance that are charged with the preservation and use of natural resources together with the equivalent ministries that are charged with the use. And so the typical one is agriculture against environment. When we have these two sectors separated, it's almost impossible because they have different objectives. What is a positive incentive for agriculture becomes a perverse incentive for conservation. And we've talked a lot about market failures. We need to develop market and supply chains for nature tourism, for non-timber forest products, for payments for ecosystem services, green technologies, and so forth. And I would argue, in the case of Manaus, for example, that we don't necessarily need to look at new green technologies and bioeconomy sectors only, but one of the, I think, major culprits of, in fact, having limited deforestation in the immediate center of the Amazon has been the presence of the Zona Franca, the free trade zone, and which has centered economic development in the urban center of Manaus, and I think has relieved a lot of pressure over the last 30 or 40 years on people going out and doing land conversion, which has been the model in many other areas. And just to finalize, in terms of the opportunities, I think we need to think big. We talk about the Brazilian Amazon. It's obviously the most important country for the Amazon, but the Amazon is more than just Brazil. And if we're talking of maintaining a functioning biome, we need to look at the biome itself and not the geopolitical boundaries. Just to give you an idea, an opportunity for recent investments in the Amazon Sustainable Landscapes Program, which is a $1.5 billion program, 200+ million from the Jeff and co-financing from all sectors. And this is working exactly on these, eliminating these 5 challenges that I've mentioned before. And hopefully we can look at how the hub can perhaps become a player and hook up to some of these initiatives, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claude, for your thoughts. I'd like to highlight on what you mentioned about the changing the trajectory, so stabilizing the Amazon on conserve, protect, restore, and produce. One thing that you mentioned, what also Isabella has mentioned about the narrative. So we have this agriculture versus conservation. So we have to, we don't need that anymore for a long time. So we can, and we have a very successful project and programs combining these 2 things that's not separate. And also on the hub, we are going to, as in Manaus, we are going to study and leverage the lessons learned from the Amazon Free Trade Zone. So it also decreased a lot of pressure on the forest. So this is one good component on the conservation in the area. So approaching to the conclusion of this amazing session, we are going to have this final question to our panelists, which is, what does the success look like in 5 years? So everyone, we are going to have 4 minutes to address these questions and share their final thoughts, and we'll keep the same order. So back into Isabella. Isabella, what does this success look like to you for this green economy hub in the Amazon?
Oh God, it's like, I hope a good dream, but probably 4 or 5 things that would be illustrative of the ambition concerning the success in the future. The first one, it's the key point is deforestation, the part of the past. As in the common understanding in Brazil, we are in the robust route to achieve this goal, as Brazil achieved in the past considering inflation, economic inflation. Nobody for this generation even knows what it means. My generation knows a lot what it means considering the impacts of the quality of life. So we need to transform this reality. And this is very powerful to show that green economies can bring indeed a new reality for all the Brazilians, not only for Amazonia. And Amazonia is a key player for this. The second one, that it's about image and about, unfortunately, in Amazonia, we have this image in Brazil considering the environmental destruction and how we go against the global interests. And also my feeling is that we can address this hub to, as an additional driver or additional political force to bring Brazil back to the international cooperation world, consider our soft power expression in the past. It is very important to restore this in Brazil. Okay, for Brazilians and for Brazil's international cooperation, foreign affairs policy, and this is something very important because this will come from Brazilian society, not from the governmental or public institutions. This is really, really a powerful political message because it's showing that we go beyond what we have today. Third one, I'd like to add. Hello, Claude, nice to see you again. What you mentioned concerning these political rooms, I think that it's absolutely important that you can have in 5 years consolidated political rooms exactly to bring different constituents together. But we cannot forget that when we bring people together, I know because I did this, it's really, really a hard task, but we need to provoke a common understanding and we need to address common interests. It is not necessarily so easy, okay, to bring, but it's very important in such a way that you can have a new understanding about Amazonia development challenge and also new credibility and confidence. It's really hard, okay, to bring these 2 things together and also the co-responsibility and political roles for different players that will be in these rooms. We need to consider the new IG8, the Development Human Index that probably will come, I know that will come will bring, environmental perspective into the index, and we need to manage this better. How indeed our initiative will contribute for these new perspectives for the region, because we have the lowest index, IJ measures in Amazonia. And in my feeling is that we need to have this building block on green finance system for Amazon region. What it means, because we have these movements today in Brazil, not only international ones, but we have two different movements. For private banks in Brazil, consider the green system, green finance, and also we need, I will conclude soon, and also have the central bank initiative, the new one that was launched last week, exactly with the perspective 2022. How we'd like to influence this? How indeed we would like to go into there and to manage this a new arrangement that Brazil is preparing. It's fully engaged. Brazil now is part of BES board as observer, but it's very important because we discussed the Green Swan, we discussed exactly how climate change will affect the international financial system, and indeed how Amazonia can go into this with solutions. And this hub must understand what is this new political movements and economic ones. And for this, we need to have numbers. So in 5 years, we need numbers, as I think that Gary also Assad mentions strategically. Without numbers, forget it. It's all intention. And if you allow me, I'd like to highlight that as a personal dream, not only the capacity of Amazonia to develop projects, this is very important, okay? It's to have a gap of a capacity, regional capacity to manage this. But as a dream, I'd like that the Brazilians will have the ambition 5 years to be also Amazonians, as in the past we used to dream to be cariocas, okay, from Rio de Janeiro. So it's a new way to show that Amazonia, it's part of our ID, national ID. It's part of our how we can be proud of and how we can be back to the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Isabella. This is a very nice dream to have everyone adopt the Amazon as an identity. I think we have to talk with some networks to make us make a soap opera, so Amazon could be as known as the Cariocas, as you mentioned. And just to emphasize and quoting you, bringing back Brazil to the global arena. So this is very, very strong as a dream, and hopefully is a very practical one. Jamie, what are your thoughts on this 5-year plan / dream for the Green Economy Hub here in the Amazon?
Thanks so much, Victor. So Virgilia started with ecological tipping points. I'd like to think about social, economic, and political tipping points. These tipping points, like their ecological counterparts, they happen quickly, and even though they're unpredictable and their thresholds are uncertain, we can determine the trajectory and we can nudge them forward. So I have 7 hopes for 2025. First, deforestation has stopped in the Amazon largely because corporations view deforestation as a material risk for corporations, because technology makes it impossible to hide, and because green entrepreneurs see forests as having more value standing than cut down. Second, I see intensive restoration efforts are underway, in part because finance is flowing for restoration as part of the decade of restoration, but also because there are local payments for ecosystem services and new agreements. Third, there's a near universal and unwavering commitment to deforestation-free commodities through partnerships such as the New York Declaration on Forests. Fourth, in part because of a commitment to a green recovery, 10,000 new micro, small, and medium enterprises have been launched, and they're showing the way toward a new bioeconomy. And as a result, green MSMEs have taken hold as an emerging new market for investment. Fourth, because of a widespread awareness of the importance of the Amazon in stabilizing our climate, there is transformation on secure rights for indigenous peoples on untitled lands. And there's a governance and political will to protect those rights. The next is because a flow of stimulus finance packages, there's a focus on green recovery in the Amazon, and these funds have jump-started to transition to an inclusive bioeconomy. And finally, there are 0 environmental defenders killed in the Amazon in 2025. And environmental defenders are widely celebrated and protectors defenders such as the Equator Prize winner Neimante Nkimo, who is the president of the Guarani of Pastaza and a co-founder of the Alianza Sebo. She was listed this morning by Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential people of 2020. Those are my 7 points of hope for 2025.
Thank you very much, Jamie. I mean, very powerful what you mentioned, and I quote you again, deforestation is impossible to hide. So this is very, very, very important. And again, we need the science behind that. And Flash News, we do already have this science. So it's something it's not rock science, actually satellite science. So we already manage this. So it's not something that we can, we do not need to wait 2025 to do so. It's just a matter of political will. Thank you again. Now, Assad, could you share your roadmap for the success of this Amazon hub?
Yes, but I think, number one, it requires really deep thinking because there are issues, as I was saying, which will take much longer than 5 years, but we can take definitely the first steps. I think the first one should be that within 5 years, we should be able to effectively communicate a business case, a winning case, that standing forest is more valuable than timber. And the case, your target audience should be the people who are dependent on Amazon, not the rest of the world or the environmental community, because I think most of the damage is coming from within. Number two, I think we need a financing mechanism in place which can compensate for any foregone income that people have to leave behind because of saving the Amazon. What I'm seeing is Amazon protocol type agreement where, it was very clear that if you move from one production site to the other production site, there is a mechanism to compensate you for that. And Amazon is a successful environmental agreement, or the most successful one so far. So we can replicate that model for Amazon, I'm sure. Number three, I think the subsidies and incentive structure is a big factor. And I think that is something on which if we can focus within 5 years, we should be able to at least neutralize bad subsidies or bad incentives that are coming from the government. My fourth option probably would be that all financing, and I'm not saying bankable project, I'm saying all financing and investment in and around Amazon should be green and inclusive. And when I say this, you can use EGS indicators or you can use principles for responsible investments, but there are many mechanisms that can make sure. This patchwork of responsible investments is actually causing damage because it gives opportunity to the investors to greenwash their whole brand while their services are actually very limited. The fifth one that I would probably put is having a sustainability plan for the hub in place and probably institutionalized. We create many of these hubs, they are very time bound. What we have learned from Paige that if you provide 5-year support, then you should have a sustainability plan in place through which either the governments or the people who are main stakeholders, they take over and we build their capacity within 5 years. And my last point is the minimum bar of success for the hub should be that the economic recovery from the COVID is at least carbon and Amazon neutral. And that is a minimum I'm saying. I feel that this is basically an opportunity to turn the tide. If the economic recovery, which will start very soon, and our timeline is only next 18 to 24 months, is actually green, we can actually change the way people look at Amazon, use Amazon, and probably invest in Amazon. So these 18 to 24 months for me are the most critical period. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Assad. Very, very powerful what you brought, that ESG cannot be greenwashing mechanism. So we have to have a very important and robust matrix and metrics, not matrix, metrics, and a very solid way to monitor that. And passing to Watson, I'm sorry, Watson, I skipped you, my apologies. So what's your take on the next 5 years or 18 months, as Assad mentioned, for the Amazon hub?
Thanks. I wanted to just first, I agree with everything that Jamie said again, and I think her points are spot on. Taking a slightly different tack for, what does this look like in a few years? I think that we really need to see what we're talking about is mainstreaming natural capital and biodiversity, both in the public and private sectors. And so all of the interventions we're talking about with the financial system or with corporations is really about changing the calculus in the way that natural capital and biodiversity is seen on the balance sheet. And I think we need to, it would be great within 5 years if we could see the same thing in the public sector, where we have, Ministry of Finance actually leading with putting forward broad-based, environmentally sound investment portfolios for international investors, where we could see that within ministries of planning or ministries of infrastructure, we're looking at real integration of nature-based solutions, not just lip service to that, where we're looking at the very upstream of the planning process and seeing where, if we're going to be doing this project anyway, is there a way to incorporate nature-based solutions in such a way that we're generating income and benefits for the environment? And that's going to require both looking at tenders, but looking at the way that we do procurements and looking at the ways that these kinds of projects are structured, very early on in the process in the government. And I think we're very far from that in many countries where this kind of mainstreaming is happening in a whole of government approach. And so in 5 years, I would love to see that. And also one area that I think we didn't talk much about, but is, Colombia has started doing private compensation, mitigation banking and compensation models. We're also seeing kind of a drive towards biodiversity credit trading. And if we could start to see kind of both the habitat mitigation bank model expand across the region a bit, so that where projects are causing unavoidable damage, they're actually required to invest in public or private projects that actually can bring benefit. We can start to channel some funds, but also really just having more and better models that are mainstreamed across not just one country, but many countries. So thank you.
Watson, thank you very much. And again, public learning from private. And it's very important that you mentioned the procurement, because multilateral agencies play an important role of that. And one of the goals of the hub is expanding models. So the one that you mentioned in Colombia, we're very pleased that you can connect with us in order to scale this up, learn from them and scale that up. Last but not least, Claude, we have heard everyone's perspectives for the next 5 years. What you can add or emphasize to have this green economy hub as a success?
Thanks, and I'll try and be quite short because I know we're over time, but without being cynical, I think in the 5-year time frame, the fact that the hub would still be in existence and thriving, I think it will be success. We know the political and economic situations in Brazil and in the world are probably not conducive to supporting this kind of initiative. And so there will be a lot of wins against the hub, but I think just being in existence in 5 years would be a major success. The real success, I think, is looking at that beacon on the hill again, of having eventually a stable, resilient, and functioning Amazon biome. Talking about zero deforestation, zero biodiversity loss, and also healthy and thriving local populations, including indigenous people that are provided for with sustainable livelihoods. Lastly, and again, I'm not being cynical here, but I think the real success will be measured when there's no longer a need for a green economy hub, not because it will have failed, but rather because the new development model, whatever that looks like in terms of a green economy, will have been mainstreamed within all of the public and private sector institutions. And we will no longer need outside help or a reminder of what we're trying to achieve. We will have literally mainstreamed all of these practices within our institution.
Thank you, Claude. Keep us real here. This is very, very important. So I hope you like these inspiring ideas as much as I did. They were fantastic. Our final panel will bring us to the closing remarks. In addition to Oliver and Virgilia that you already spoken, I also invite Steve Bass from the International Institute for Environmental and Development, IID. They will have an amazing task to support us to coordinate ideas and actions, putting in a what's next perspective. All these in 3 minutes each. I invite you then, Oliver, to bring his closing remarks. Oliver?
Okay, so when there are interrelated, I mean, Assad touched upon it, there are interrelated challenges here. An Amazon bioeconomy is in truth swimming against the tide, both nationally in Brazil and globally in the world. But I want to be a little bit more optimistic. One of the things that is the benefit of working in a global coalition is that you can see some of the tipping points that Jamie's talking about. You can see there is a tipping point about how you measure success of economic activity. You can see that's moving closer. You can see the finance community moving closer to green bonds, natural capital assets, natural capital markets. You can see that start to emerge. You can start to see sectoral transitions on certainly on energy is starting to accelerate, and you can see it in transport, you can see it in housing, all around the world you can see this. Now when you sit in one place you see an isolated challenge, but you can start to see how these different adoption curves across all of these different things will start to connect. And I think that when earlier on when we talked about there isn't a definition, I just want to point you to, again, to the Green Economy Tracker. Have a look at that. There are 20 policies that exist in various countries around the world, the best practice. No one government is doing them all, but they're all on the march, and they are starting to appear and exist. So our challenge with this partnership is to ensure that we are pioneering and leading in a local solution that brings this evidence that it can work at a local level, but also work at the global level so it empowers and creates the enabling conditions. And the story between the two is mutually reinforcing. You need the global macro, but you need also a solution to exist. So both of those will work dynamically together, and that's exactly how the GEC will work with FAS. We will learn from FAS, look at the obstacles to the solutions that are being created in the bioeconomy of the Amazon and try and address those barriers at a global level. But we also use the FAS experience to encourage the experimentation and the leap of faith that other, certainly forest economies are doing around the world. So this is a fabulous opportunity. And I would say my closing comment is, I think we can afford to be a little bit more optimistic that some of those tipping points are coming to us faster and faster, and COVID is accelerating. People are feeling vulnerable and concerned like they've never done before. And I think that we have a fabulous opportunity to position resilience, prosperity, and an economy based on the health of nature right into that story of recovery. So I hope that we do that together, and I continue to extend the invitation to work with you. And my final point, I hope Jamie becomes our US Foreign Secretary.
Thank you very much, Oliver. I also go to you as an optimist. Steve, after listening carefully all these incredible panelists, what are your highlights as closing remarks?
Thank you very much, Victor, and thank you, panel. What a wonderful panel. Oliver started by saying we want to seek all voices and perspectives. This is the way we want to start this initiative. We've had some tremendous perspectives, some news, some inspiration from a really great panel. We want to see you as part of this initiative. And I've been taking careful note, and as the sort of curator of our evolving background document, I will be enriching it with your thoughts. Just a few thoughts that you brought to me in particular. I was very taken by Isabella's notion that we need to start to reshape international cooperation, you know, using that international consensus on the Amazon, in the Amazon, using Amazon voice and soft power on the global scene. There's time for change. With Page and others, we are trying to reshape consensus on green economy, but here's a great challenge here to reshape international cooperation, recognizing the role of the Amazon. I really take Assad's point that we need to think systemic. We need to be transformative, looking at root causes, and we are trying to conduct diagnosis, but diagnosis with dialogue in the field with voices that matter. we really believe that we need societal demand as well as a kind of top-down policy if changes are to endure. People want it, it becomes part of their identity, people support policy. So that notion of dialogue in the field and deeper diagnostic is really important. We've had some great thoughts on thinking on systemic gaps, and Jamie and Gregor pointed to that finance gap, that finance system, green finance system, missing middle, and we will focus attention on that because I think the other gap that we know we can fill is a catalytic gap. Both FAS and GEC are new institutions. They were designed around the notion that natural capital is the basis for economy and for society. So they are institutions that can work to achieve this. In terms of sustainability of the hub, that hub is there, as I think Claude was saying, to help rewire the national architecture, the regional architecture, the local architecture. And so the hub may last 5-10 years, but it will remain in terms of reshaping that wiring. We know this will work. The GEC has 7 other hubs in other countries, and that's an exciting thing too. We can link the Amazon hub up with these other hubs that have enabled, and Paige has been a partner very often, that have enabled government work to be better implemented. In the Amazon, we want to go further than better government policy. We want to shape that policy. And I think with a group like this, we have all the power to make this happen. So all I would ask is if anybody does have any detailed comments on the paper, please let us know. We'll keep you in the loop as the strategy emerges in the next 6 months. But thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Very, as usual, very, very sharp. Finally, Virgilio, what you can bring on these next steps perspective on the green economy hub?
Well, let me thank you all for great comments. Let me make a special thanks once again to Steve Bass, who helped a lot in the design of the document that we have just published. And I think we had a fantastic panel. Isabella's vision of the incorporation of the Amazon in the soul and spirit of everyone. I think it's great. It's a great broad vision. I think maybe we should have a vision of Amazonize everybody all over the world in a way that everybody receives the benefits from the Amazon. I think we should engage people from China and Europe and the future foreign minister of the US has just been suggested, Jamie. So we're all campaigning for you, Jamie. and I think going to Jamie's points, I think her 7 visions are very broad also and ambitious. Of course, we're not going to accomplish it all from our single end of the story, but rather through a partnership. So I see all of you as panelists and the 79 hungry participants who are still with us here as partners. So I think we will only accomplish the dreams that Jamie laid down, building a very broad coalition. And I think that's the way to go. And I think we all share very similar dreams and aspirations. I think Claude was very pragmatic in his view, saying that surviving 5 years would be a goal, and then dying, because eventually we will become useless. I think that's a very interesting vision. So surviving first and dying next, but dying because ideally green economy would have become mainstream and would not be necessary to have someone reminding everybody that green economy is good. And Greg brought a very important set of initiatives that IDB is leading similar to GEF. So I think maybe if we can find ways, Greg, of hooking now this hub to your initiative and seeing how we can build a broad alliance. We've just done a very successful initiative here. We're facing COVID-19. We built an alliance of 100 institutions, municipal governments, different branches of governments, universities, civil society organizations, grassroots organizations, business, and it was a very, very successful, relatively speaking, to bring us support to indigenous villages and communities in the remote areas of the Amazon. So I envision a similar approach for the hub, building an alliance. You guys represent in a way the global alliances, international alliances, and we are now going to go down to the Amazon. In the second launch, we're going to have a launch in Portuguese and a launch in Spanish for that. And Assad, I think, also brought a very institutional perspective that is very useful. We have to structure, we have to have a vision of management, and I think that's very useful for us. And so my time is up, and we just missed a little bit the timing of the event, but I'd like to congratulate Victor for managing very well the event. Thank you so much. And finally, let me just make an invitation for you to come over and visit us as soon as the vaccine comes. So hopefully the vaccine will be very short.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'd like only to highlight that this is what we're discussing today internationally, how to tell new stories based on the future, not based on the past. So I hope that the Huge can be a good can share with us with new stories and bring not only hope, but really a new way to see our challenge between humankind and nature. Okay, you can make the difference in a positive way. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Pope Francis. Isabella, just a quick reaction. As Pope Francis liked to mention, we don't have room for optimism, but we can be hopeful. I think we can be hopeful.
But always pragmatic, don't forget it, okay? If you want to address solutions. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Okay, have a nice weekend. I hope so. Okay, and see you soon.
So before closing, thank you very much, Isabella and Virgilio.
Thank you, Victor.
You're welcome. So Virgilio, as always, brought two very important things. Amazonizing us, ourselves, is going to be a new concept now, and also dying the green economy, because within 5 years, there is not going to be green economy. Green is going to be regular. So we are going to just call economy, and that's it.
New economies, what we have to avoid Bolsonaro, it's true. How we can manage, it's absolutely true. Okay, this is behind the scenes. What we are doing today, not myself, because I'm completely against, but I'm helping behind the scenes, is that we cannot address green, okay? We need to address new economies. So when you talk about new economy, new economies. New economy, everybody wants to host, but green, let's forget that. Don't forget that we have 5 shades of greens, and the key one is dollar. So you can convince Bolsonaro teams to move forward.
Okay. Sure. Okay. Thank you very much. So
thank you. Bye.
To conclude, no worries. To conclude, if Caroline, could you share the screen of other events that we are going to hold? Thank you. So we are going to have the follow-up events, as Virgilio and Oliver mentioned, the national and local launch in October and the regional launch in Spanish for the region in November. So we have these Stuart and Gabriela as our focal points for both organizations. And last but not least, I'd like to congratulate us all. It was an exciting morning here in the Amazon, not just because the launch is approaching, but a lot of food for thought. And it's a must to take advantage of this global rearrangement due to COVID-19 to put on track the green economy or the new economy for real. Here in the Amazon, this is a matter of survival, not just the natural ecosystem itself, but also us as humanity. I'm very, very proud and happy to be part of this, as everyone here are. I think everyone that joined us here, a lot of people, very nice people here, our teams that made this happen, Emily Benson from the Green Economy Coalition, Gabriela Sampaio from FAS, and Carolina Ramirez from Sdgs and Amazonia, and of course, our high-level panelists, Oliver, Virgilio, Isabella, Jamie, Gregory, Assad, and Claude. I wish you a pleasant day. Be green, be safe, be healthy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.